the combination of all those things are really, really, really tough. Like I was in a dark place for a long time, for the greater part of a year. Like I didn't have the energy to get out of bed. I, I questioned a lot of things.
What up, fam? Welcome to another episode of Life Beyond the Game. Holy cow. I don't know about y'all, but these podcasts, these conversations just keep getting juicier and juicier. I got a few amazing ones coming up. You're not going to want to miss them. If you're really enjoying this podcast, make sure you hit the follow, subscribe, wherever you're listening to it, watching it. Click the little button that notifies you when a new episode is live, because I got like really good episodes coming up and it just keeps getting better and better. I'm really, really enjoying the depth of conversations that are taking place, the way people are opening their hearts and sharing their journey just continues to blow me away. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your day to connect with me and the guests that I'm having on the show and the podcast. Really means a lot. Thank you for the support. Today's guest is Jason Fox. I met Jason just about a month or two ago. You know, it seems like all these incredible synchronicities are happening in my life. I don't know about you, but the more I seem to just connect with my heart and find a state of presence and just following the threads of, you know, the universe lays out for me, that I just meeting incredible people and the magnetism that's happening. And so I met Jason through another entrepreneur friend, and he is an incredible entrepreneur, number one, doing really, really cool things, big things. But he's a former NFL player, a former offensive lineman. And it's always fun sitting down with a fellow offensive lineman, especially someone like Jason. He's so humble, and he's been through quite a journey. I mean, he probably had one of the most illustrious college careers as an offensive lineman I've ever heard of. He started, I think, every single game in a row from his true freshman year all the way through his senior year, and he got hurt on the very last game of his college career before the bowl game. And that affected his draft status. He was rated to be probably a first-round pick, but because of the injury and the recovery, ended up getting drafted in the fourth round. Actually, same year as me. I think he got drafted I was 117. I think he was 128 or something like that, which is really cool. And so it's cool to full circle, come back and just connect with this guy that played during the same time as me. And, you know, all the injuries and stuff he dealt with throughout his career, what a roller coaster ride. And it really resonated with me because I went through a lot in my career. And I think that's part of this. You know, the power of this podcast is kind of peeling the layers back and seeing behind the scenes of what it takes to really reach the pinnacle. And, you know, a lot of times it's not all it's cracked up to be. But this episode's amazing. Jason's now an entrepreneur. He started a really cool company with a really cool idea called Earbuds. And he had this vision when he was playing at a pregame, watching Cam's rookie year, jamming out with his headphones on. And he's like, man, I wonder what Cam's listening to. And little did he know that was the genesis of the company he's working on now. It launched, I think they've raised over $10 million, and it was really successful. And then he went through some really insane business lessons, I guess you could call them, with some of the big players in the streaming services like Spotify and Apple, and had deals with all of them. And then those they came out with a competitive product, which forced him to do some really drastic pivots in the business. They're in the process of relaunching. It's really cool technology. It's really around solving the problem of shared music in this world. And the way he was sharing with me was really fascinating. There's the music industry and the streaming services are so disjointed, and it's hard for me and you as a listener to co-create playlists or listen to stuff together and share music. And so he's really solving that problem, and they're in the process of relaunching. So there's going to be some links in the show notes. Go check it out. I do want to make a note as well that my nightmare happened. My nightmare podcasting nightmare happened during this episode where I was pressing record at my studio, and when I got up, it was no longer recording. And so I was really worried that I didn't know how much of the podcast was recorded. Unfortunately, we lost the last 10 to 15 minutes of the show, but there's still 2.5 hours of really juicy episode available. So we're going to try and transition it out at that point, but I wanted to let you know, like, if it feels like it gets cut out towards the end, it's kind of when we're wrapping up anyway. That's the reason why. I appreciate your patience with that. There's still a ton of value in this show, and there's only that, like I said, only that last little sliver that you're going to be missing out on, and that was mostly our formalities and our goodbyes and our signing off. So appreciate y'all. I hope you enjoy this episode with Jason Fox. Before we get started, I want to share about this vision I have. This vision for a more beautiful world. A vision where we reintroduce the sacred back into our society and our culture. The world is ready for a new type of leadership, a new paradigm of leadership. One where we learn to lead from the heart, to listen to our intuition and our gut, to implement the tools of deeper connection and synergy within our businesses, within the teams that we lead, within our families, our relationships. Really being able to anchor in these grounded connection to self, connection to nature, and connection to community. And that's why I'm launching a one-of-a-kind community called the Heart Collective. And we're calling in our 40 founding members this year. High-impact entrepreneurs, influential visionaries, C-level execs, people who are really doing big things in the world, who are heart-centered and desire to not only reach deeper levels of their own embodiment and highest potential, but individuals who know the power that we have when we come together, when we connect, not only with our own personal visions, but with a collective vision, being able to rally our resources, our impact, our influence for greater good in the world. I am freaking stoked. If anything I just said tickles a little something in your heart, and you want to learn more, there'll be a link in the show notes. Go to theheartcollective.com. You can apply, learn more, or you can reach out to me directly. I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to building this community with you and changing the world. You're not alone. It's time to bring those allies together. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy the show with Jason Fox. Jason, what's up, man?
What's up, man? It's good to be here.
Yeah, back in Austin, huh?
Back in Austin. It feels good, man. This is like a second home for me. I lived here for 3 going on 4 years, and so I don't know. It's a special place. I love this place.
Yeah. And you drove down from Fort Worth?
Fort Worth is home. That was I born and raised there. I had a house there after my rookie year in Detroit, and I still have it. And so that's, I don't know, just that will always be home. But Austin's a special place too.
Was your rookie year in Detroit?
My rookie year was Detroit. Yep.
I thought you got drafted to Miami, or was I mistaken?
No,
you went to school in Miami.
Went to school in Miami. So Miami, Detroit, Miami.
And then you played in Miami later part of your career.
Later, yeah.
We'll dive into that. You're coming down here for a board meeting.
That's right.
Because you're a big businessman now.
Trying to be.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your business, and then we'll drop into the story of how it came. But I just kind of want to paint the picture of what you're doing now.
Yeah, our company's called Earbuds. Our mission is bringing people together through sharing music. This is actually kind of a spin-off of our original idea, which was, synchronized listening along in real time to people. So if you're familiar with Twitch, it was like Twitch for music. And I thought of that idea, and we can get into this later, from, watching professional athletes, and they were always listening to music as they were getting into the zone before a game. And I was like, how cool would it be if they could share that experience?
It's such a dope idea.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, we had, it was really most athlete centric. And I think that's what really helped help get our story out there initially, because, former athlete launches this idea to get closer to athletes. And that was kind of where social media was evolving from into instead of posting, more sharing and experiences. And we had a lot of success with that. We had over 1,000 athletes on the platform, some really big names, some high profile quarterbacks.
Who were the high profile quarterbacks?
We had, Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield and Ryan Tannehill went live a lot. We had a lot of other stud NFL players. We had, Rob Gronkowski, probably 100 to 200 more NFL players. We had PGA golfers go live. We had Stipe from the UFC go live before he won the belt, which was really cool. We had NBA players going live like James Harden, John Morant. We had several really high profile moments. And then we started expanding into music. We had a lot of artists go live, especially right when COVID hit. We teamed up with a group called Music Cares, and it was a foundation to give back to artists because they weren't able to perform live. And so we said, hey, we did this campaign with, I think it was 63 artists went live, and every listener was able to contribute to Music Cares and give back, which was really fun.
So the idea is, if I'm a fan watching like the pre-game warm-up of an NFL game and I see Cam Newton like rocking out and getting the crowd going, it's like I get to listen in on what he's actually listening to in real time and hear and connect with the energy that he's feeling in his own process. Yeah,
that was the original idea. And I'll get to, kind of where we've evolved into what we're doing now, because I think that's even a bigger idea. But because that's a special moment, right? That we got some time, so I'll tell you the whole story. Cam Newton was the inception moment. That was the idea. We were playing Carolina the first game of the season. It was Cam Newton's first ever game.
His rookie year.
Oh, wow. And, he was the high profile man, number 1 draft pick. I was a very average or below average lineman. And I was just doing my typical warm up, stretch routine before the game. And Cam is from me to you distance. And Cam just had so much cooler than me. He's just bobbing his head with his beats on and getting amped up before the game, getting his teammates all pumped up, getting the crowd into it. And I was like, my first reaction was, I'm curious what he's listening to. He's in the zone right there. But I thought, looking around the stadium, filling up with people and knowing that millions or more are going to watch this game at home, like, how many other people would love to be in his headphones and, share this experience, and what would Cam say to him if he knew they were tuning in? And that was the initial idea. We ran with that. That
was in 2011, because that was his rookie year, I think, or when he got drafted.
I believe so. Yes.
And what year was that for you?
That was my second year.
Second year.
Yes.
So you're still young, and you played for how long?
Played 6 years.
6 years. So this is the genesis of the idea. So did you start working on it before you retired, or was this always kind of percolating in the background?
It was always percolating in the background. Like, I've always had just, an entrepreneurial mind. Like, I just would see things and I'd be like, that could be done better. And I had a lot of ideas, but that was the one that I just could never get out of the back of my head.
What were some of the other ideas you had?
I had an idea for a company called, and I was going to call it Bro Bets, which was like the best name ever. Bro Bets would have been a service with like a marketplace for betting on sports. Because I saw this as another locker room idea. I would see guys in the locker room. You went to UNLV, I went to Miami. So if we were playing a college football game on Saturday, guys would be like, "Oh, I bet you that Miami wins," and you'd be like, "Nah, UNLV's got this." And then it was always such a pain to collect. I was like, what if you could bet with your friends, but it was hooked up to, Venmo or something, or PayPal at the time, and then you just extend. But you're not betting the house. You're betting. It's a marketplace for bets.
Oh, so it's like me versus you, but then being able to just like create the technology. So if it's Venmo, then you guys just put the money in beforehand, and it pays it.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Kinda.
So you're just talking about, because when you're in the NFL, all the guys in the NFL, when their colleges play, so like if we're in the offensive line room together and our colleges play, then we get together and say, hey, like, let's put $100, couple $100, depending on how big the game is.
Right.
People put some big money on that, and then we'd watch the game and make it really fun.
Exactly.
And so being able to do that for everyone.
Yeah, and be able to do that. I used to always talk about that idea and earbuds. And what's funny is I advise a company called Bro Throw. I would have called it Bro Bets, and
Same idea that you
It's
had.
the same idea, and he's done it 100 times better than I would have probably done it. They're a really cool company, because I actually found out about it because one of my Dolphins teammates sent me a text. He's like, "So you did start it? This is awesome. I love it." And I was like, "Actually, that's not me." So I just emailed the founder, and I was like, "Dude, I love what you're building. I had this idea a while ago." And Brady Sharp is the founder CEO's name, and Brady's just crushing it with it. It's an awesome platform. It's super easy to use and intuitive.
Is this an app?
No, it's just a site.
It's a site website, and you go there,
and you can bet with your friends. You can build like a friend pool, or you could just propose a bet like, "Hey, I think UConn's going to beat who'd they play in the championship? San Diego State. Hey, I think UConn's going to win," and it just matches you up with someone that wants to take.
Someone just takes the bet.
There's no house. That's the genius of it. And that was my idea.
Do they just take microtransactions of each bet? Like, how does the business make money?
There's advertising, and then there's a subscription tier. Like there's a free tier, and then there's subscription tier. So you get, if you pay them $20 a month, then you unlock a ton of benefits. And so I think the way they're growing and the way they're catching on, I think one of the big players will take them out eventually. But
or buy them.
Yeah, that's what I meant by take them out.
Take them out.
Yeah.
But a big player took you out and didn't buy you.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful with it. Yeah, we'll talk about that because there's a big pivot going on. But let's talk about your career first. Let's talk about your playing days. You played at the University of Miami, and going into the draft process, pretty highly touted prospect going into the NFL draft, and had a pretty serious injury. What was it, the last game of your career? Take us through that whole process and how that impacted not only your career but your life.
Yeah. So I played at the University of Miami. Through my recruiting process in high school, when Miami offered me, I knew that was where I wanted to go, because I had two goals when I was like thinking critically about like where I want to go to school. I was like, I want to win a national championship and win, period. And I was like, and I want to fulfill my dream of being an NFL player. And at the time, that would be like choosing Alabama or something now, because at the time Miami was the number one team or number one school for both of those.
What year was this?
This was my senior year was 2006.
Okay.
And so they just played back-to-back national championship a few years earlier in 2001 and 2002. And so, and they were still, they were the previous year, they had 6 first-round draft picks and, putting a lot of guys in the NFL, and they were still playing in great bowl games. And so when they offered me, I was like, this is the school. Both of their tackles, I played tight end in high school, but I knew I was going to play. I was not built like some of the tight ends they had at Miami. I couldn't run like Greg Olsen or, some of the other guys. We like Jimmy Graham. I played with both of those guys in college, both great people. And they became, all pros in the NFL. Like I was never going to keep up with them athletically. So I kind of knew I was going to be an offensive lineman. And, the other schools I was getting recruited to said, you're going to redshirt. You're going to ride the pine for 2 or 3 years. And hopefully by your time you're a junior, you'll be strong enough and ready to play. And Mario Cristobal, now the head coach of Miami, was the O-line coach and recruited me. And he said, I don't care. He said, the best players will play. And he goes, both of our guys are graduating. We have upperclassmen that are going to want the job. But, if you come in and earn it, I'll play a freshman. I'm not scared. And so I knew, because I knew that was the risk of like, if a freshman or if a sophomore starts and then I have to sit behind him for a while, that could be tough. And I was able to play my freshman year, played Monday night, my first ever game. That was a crazy story.
Tell us.
So Miami, Florida State used to always be the first game of the season. I think we were ranked 9th. They were ranked 6th. I'm 18 years old, just turned 18. Playing in Monday night, it was before bowl games, or like if not including bowl games or national championship, it was the second most televised college football game of all time.
Damn, your first game ever.
And
what did that feel like before? Like, can you drop into the feelings you had going into that game? Like the nervous system, the nerves, the angst, the butterflies?
I threw up 4 times before that game. I'm not kidding you. Like I
You're
was
just so nervous.
because, my first rep in training camp, and I'm not trying to make it about me, but like my first rep in my freshman year training camp, I think I got like 2 reps of like, organized team, like not just like drills. Like they threw me in with like the 4 stringers. And then every week at training camp, I started taking with the 3s and the 2s. Then I started taking some reps with the 1s. And he told me like 2 days before the games, he's like, I'm going to start you at right tackle. And
So I was a true freshman year.
I was a true freshman.
18 years old.
Yeah, playing against, they were number 6. They were the 6th ranked team at the time, and they had 2 stud defensive ends. One ended up being a first round pick, one ended up being a second round pick, and Cameron Wembley and Everett Brown. And so I'm going against Cameron Wembley the whole game, a first round pick. I'm 18 years old, so I'm shitting bricks before the game. I didn't keep a single thing down, like 24 hours before the game, and I'm throwing up like crazy. And you run, Miami's thing is you run out of the smoke and into the old Orange Bowl that's now where the Marlins play. And it was wild because Monday Night Football, that was the elite of the elite in the NFL, and we're playing Monday Night Football, my first ever game. And we get to the sideline, and every Miami great is on the sideline, like Michael Irvin and Edgerrin James, and all these players are there. There's 20, 30 former players. Shaq and D Wade were on their sideline because they were playing with the Heat at the time, and Jay-Z and Beyonce on our sideline. I'm like, holy shit, this is
dropped you right in.
This is college football.
Yeah.
Like this is wild. Thank God we had our coordinator. The first play of the game, we went deep, and it was an incomplete pass, but I think he had the tight end helping me and the running back helping me. He's like, I'm going to get you some help on the first play. Then you're on your own. I was like, okay, that helps.
That's a smart coordinator. There's nothing worse when you're playing in a coordinator. Like when I'm watching football now and I see tackles, they're just not doing well. They're just getting beat.
And the coordinator makes no changes.
No adjustment. Like get a chip in there. Like the good coordinators, right away, they like got tight ends. Because if you can get that tight end just to chip a little bit or just have a presence there and then go out to the flat or something, like you can't run an offense if the tackle's getting crushed.
I can't agree with you more. There's nothing more frustrating watching TV when, everybody has a bad game. I've had bad games. Do something to change up the rhythm. Do something to get in that DN's head. But that's all, we can talk about that in the later. And anyways, so I don't know how we got down this. We ended up barely losing that game.
How'd you play?
I played pretty good. I graded out the highest, which was credit.
Nice.
Which was I didn't mean to sound that in a cocky way, but
how did it feel afterward? Like, what was the feeling when you got this first game under your belt, and just obviously such a heightened experience with all these celebrities and pro athletes and Hall of Famers around, and you played well, you graded out the best.
It sucked because anytime you lose, you don't feel great about it afterwards, right? But like, so that night you're like, man, we started off the season with the loss. We lost to our rival. Like, there's no like worse feeling than that. But like, the next day and throughout the week, when you see the film and you see the grades, and you're like, oh, because you don't know at the time, right? Like, the reason why I was so nervous and, couldn't keep anything down, I was like, because you have this like inferior complex. Like, do I belong? Like, am I going to even do okay?
Am I going to get exposed?
Am I going to get exposed ever and like
cost my team everything?
Yeah. Am I going to allow a sack or a big holding call in like the worst possible time? And so there's this complex that you're like, do I belong here?
Did that ever go away?
Not my freshman year. By the time I was, a junior, senior, like I knew I could play with these guys. And, one thing about Miami is like, we had guys like Calais Campbell that he was a DN in college. And so I blocked him every single day. And so when we went and played somebody like Duke, who we played, I think it was Duke, my second game as a freshman. So I went from, 80,000 people, even though our stadium held like probably 75 and, celebrities on the sideline. And Duke, I think there was like 15,000 people. There's nobody.
The very next game? Oh, that's funny.
And so I was like, oh, this is more of like what college football is like probably. Because that was the way Miami was. We'd sell at all the big games, but if it wasn't a big game, it would be a half empty stadium. Because there's just so much to do in Miami. But yeah, like, when you block the best and you're going against top tier talent, my freshman year, we had like 6 or 7 defensive guys get drafted. We had 2 first-round picks from our defense. And so when you're blocking John Beeson in college every day and, some of the guys we had, it's like you go into the games and it felt slower.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that was a massive advantage. And so once, getting those reps really helped out. But freshman year, that never went away. I threw up before every single freshman, before.
It just became a ritual.
It was my process. it was my routine.
And what happened when your second season started and you didn't throw up? Was it weird? I think I'm arriving now. I feel pretty.
I don't know if I maybe threw up a couple times because I would just naturally get nervous, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing, but like it was so funny because I always knew, and I knew after a while, and even in the NFL, like you start thinking about that first play, and you're like, I got to do this. It's probably I've talked to golfers, and they see the same thing. It's like they think about that opening tee shot, like the Masters just happened. They think about setting a tone. Hey, I want to do this on the first tee shot, do this on the first tee shot. And they think all night about that first tee shot. That was me before like the first play of the game. Because it's scripted, the first couple plays. Yeah. And you're just thinking about all the different possibilities. But then once that first play happened, it's just back to
fades
football.
Away.
Yeah. You don't even feel the crowd there.
Yeah.
It's just football again. And then so I just had to I always knew I just have to get that first play out of the way, and then it's back to normal.
So you had a pretty good college career, huh? You were crushing it starting at a young age. Did you?
So I had a decent college career, and knew, probably halfway through I was like, I'm playing well, I'm grading out well, I'm receiving some postseason honors. My favorite thing at the moment, because all the guys on the team, we were addicted to the NCAA football game back when that game was around.
Oh yeah, just all playing each other in the locker room and
exactly.
Couch, yeah.
And my senior year, me, who ended up being 1,000 times better of an offensive tackle than I was, but me and Trent Williams were the 2 highest graded offensive linemen in the game. And so I was like, man, I might have a shot at the next level.
Where did Trent Williams play?
OU, Oklahoma.
That's right.
And then I think Trent Williams is, even as good as he is and high paid as he is, I think he's the best left tackle in the game. And I think, he deserves every penny he's gotten and more.
Still playing, right?
He's still playing and still playing at a high level. Yeah. I think he's, all the credit goes to, quarterbacks and, skill players, but I think he's a top 10 player in the NFL. Just the way, how consistent he is, but he also punishes people. I never had that in my game. Like I could not just bury,
a grown man.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's really different. Massive. Like I was more of a consistent player of like, hey, I'm not going to make mistakes and hopefully block my guy more times than I don't.
But you're not ripping the hole open like
but I'm
wide.
But I'm not like throwing one guy down and then go getting 2 more. That was never part of my skill set. But anyways, your question, good college career. My senior year, I started for the first time having like pain in my knee. Like my whole life, I've never really dealt with injuries and anything serious anyway. You get bumps and bruises playing football, but I started having real pain in my knee, and I would tell the trainers about it, and they're like, "Oh, it's just tendonitis." I was like, "Okay." So I played out my whole senior year, and finally, the last game of the season, it just gives out. My knee just buckles and doesn't, just.
Was this just running on a play or just blocking? What happened?
It was a pass protection. We were playing Clemson, and I got bull rushed. And I'm trying to sit down on the bull rush and stop it. And then, it's like you feel like the quarterback throw the ball because he stops rushing and like
throw it.
Yeah, I got good at saying that. But like right at the end of the play, like he gave me like one final kind of like shove, and my knee just gave out. And then I went down, and it didn't look bad on film. It's not like it just, everybody's seen the clips where you're blocking someone and someone gets thrown into your legs or tackled and you see everything buckle. Didn't look bad on film, but I tore my patella tendon. It just finally like given out. So any high school, college football players or anybody wanting to get drafted, I recommend don't tear your knee.
Yeah. This is the last game of your senior year.
So it wasn't the bowl game. So the bowl game was the only game I missed in college, and because I didn't have a knee at the time, and But that was the last regular season game.
And you started every single game of your career?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. How many games was that in a row?
It was 48.
48 games. That's got to be a record.
It's tied for the not most total at Miami, but it's tied for most consecutive.
Most consecutive. And if you would have got the bowl game, you would have broke the record.
Yeah.
Damn. So you blew your knee out literally the last regular season game. You have these draft aspirations going. I mean, were you guys, how was Miami the team that year? Were you guys competing for a national championship that year, or was it?
We had a really good senior year. So our first 4 games were Florida State. I don't remember if it's in this order, but Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech was really good at the time. Virginia Tech, which was one of our rivals and really good at the time, in Oklahoma. And all 4 of them were top 25 ranked. And we went 3 for 4. We beat Oklahoma. We beat Florida State. We beat Georgia Tech, but we lost to Virginia Tech in a nail biter in Blacksburg. And so, we spent most of the season probably ranked between 10 and 20. So, I mean, we were having a good year. And then later in the year, we had some losses, like losses we shouldn't have. And so I think we ended up the season, gosh, I don't even remember. I think it was 8-4, maybe 9-3. But so we had a decent year. And then once I knew, okay, my knee's out, I got to focus on rehab. I got to focus on getting back and healthy because.
How did it feel when you first blew it out, though? I mean, like the pain, you knew something was really wrong. What was the first thought? Because I mean, I can't imagine if you do it beginning of the season or junior year, like your sights are set on the NFL at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is riding high. I'm about to go do this thing. To feel all that pain, what initially goes through your mind?
Well, like probably when it happened, on the field, it was just about my knee. It was like, it hurt, but it was weird because you have so much adrenaline rush and you probably feel this. Like right when it happens, you could tear an ACL and it doesn't feel as much because you have so much adrenaline. You're on the field. You feel like a warrior. So it hurt, but you're like trying to just figure it out. And then like when the game ends, then it all starts to set in like, oh shit, what does this mean for like, the next phase? Like how serious is this? Does this take, 2 months to heal? Does it take 9 months to heal? I have no idea.
What were the trainers saying? Was anybody like, I mean, I guess you had to wait till the MRI to finally find out.
Yeah. And so it was a torn patella tendon, but it wasn't a complete rupture, but it was, the doctor says it's like, it's hanging on by a thread. It's like 90% torn. Like we're basically going to have to treat it like a full torn, like cut it and reattach it. And
how long was the recovery? Did the doctor say?
They said it's anywhere from 6 to 12 months,
and you could possibly not play again.
Well, I don't think that thought crossed my mind, but it was. They said tendons are a tough recovery because they don't get a lot of a lot of blood flow. If you tear your bicep, it's still a long recovery, but or if you pull a muscle, it gets a lot more blood flow. It gets a lot more healing properties. Tendons don't get a lot of blood, so. They're like, it just takes time. You can't force it with rehab. You can't force it with a lot of hacks that you can. Unfortunately, it's a time recovery.
And at this point, you were projected to be first round pick. Like, was it top 10, maybe first 2 rounds?
It was probably, top 2 or 3 rounds. It wasn't, I don't think I was going to be a top 10 pick, but
first round was a huge possibility.
I think it was a possibility. Yeah. What's funny is like, if I had to grade myself, I would have said my senior year. I think my junior year, I played much better than I did my senior year because, even though the other games my knee was, hurting, it wasn't completely torn yet. Like I wasn't able to move and do some of the things and move people as much as I used to do my junior year. Because the junior year, I felt like a spring chicken. I was fully healthy, and so. And so I don't know, but I thought I would, a lot of, I submitted papers to see like, hey, would leaving as a junior make sense? And they gave me back like, oh, you'll probably be a 2nd round pick if I left as a junior, which I learned later that they kind of like give you a really conservative number because they never want to tell somebody you're going to be a 1st round pick and they go in the 4th round and then they get mad.
Yeah. As a junior leaving, especially at such a young age. So you could have, because you had such a good year, possibly been.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. And so, but anyways, hindsight's always 20/20. So through that process, learned, hey, this is going to be, a recovery, had surgery, had a great surgeon. Our team doctor just did like Shaq's knee. I mean, he was Dr. Uribe. He's a Dolphins team doctor too. And, great knee doctor, but just kind of in a waiting game, trying to rehab what I can. Like for the draft, most people are training like crazy. I'm like training for bench, but I know that's all I'll be able to do. And that was probably you were probably 100 times better at than me. Like I wasn't the strongest offensive lineman. I think I got 25 at pro day so it wasn't like the best. There's other offensive linemen that get 40.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like, hey, I was going to really wow them with that. But knowing, hey, I was going to get, a shot at to play at the NFL, pre-knee, and hopefully, and for anybody listening, like if you're a first round pick, that, that could be life-changing money. You get a signing bonus, you have a real shot. They're going to invest in you.
Yeah, the difference between a first round and even a second round pick is massive, especially when our year 2010 was before the rookie cap. Sam Bradford got like a $70 million contract at the first pick. 32 picks later, or 33 picks later, the first pick of the second round, I think maybe gets like 1 million or 2 million.
I think it was 2
million.
So, but even like, so the second pick or the first pick of the second round got like 2, but like the last pick of the second round was just over 1 million. So even just where you were in the second round pick, and then it drops off dramatically from that. And if you're a late round, if you're a 6th or 7th rounder, I mean, there's teams that cut 6 rounders.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I was a 4th rounder. My signing bonus was 420 grand. So right in the middle of the draft. So going literally the same draft, the top pick got 70 million. I got 420 or something like that. And then the last pick or like the 7th round, I mean, those guys are getting like between 10 and 25 grand.
So we were drafted in the same round, which is
we were
so
drafted
crazy.
like 10 picks apart.
Yeah. That it's so, what a small world.
That tells you how good I was, because you had a bum knee and you got drafted.
That's not true at all.
That was fully healthy.
Not true at all, because more about the draft process. I've drug out this story. I tend to do that. So
it's a long form podcast, so we're good.
So
just getting started
with the draft process. Didn't do anything besides interview and bench at the combine. At my pro day, our pro day was a week before the draft, and I've been kind of training or kind of doing rehab, but I haven't done any running or any like serious things because it's still pretty early off of major knee surgery. And my agent tells me, hey, just jog the 40, like just show them that your knee works and you're on the road to recovery. And I told you I wasn't very good at bench. I was probably, I was probably in the 90th or like the bottom 10% percentile of bench of all offensive tackles. But I was like, what I was excelled at is I before my knee surgery, I could run. Like I was athletic. And so I was like, no, this is where I'm going to show them. I mean, there's all 32 teams are there. Like I'm going to get out and that first whistle, I get out and I feel like Usain Bolt or something. I feel the wind like through my hair. I had long hair at the time. I'm just running. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the fastest time ever. And then about 30 yards in, I felt like I got shot in the back of the leg because I teared my hamstring because I haven't been training. My hamstring hasn't done anything because I went from not doing anything and fresh off surgery to trying to run as fast as I can. And I do a face plant in front of all 32 teams. And my agent, I signed with Drew Rosenhaus, as every Miami player did. That was kind of the way. And he told me when I left there, he's like, you might not get drafted. And he's like, we'll try to get you on a team, but a week before the draft, fresh off knee surgery, torn hamstring. He's like, I don't know what this looks like for you. I just want to be honest. And that night, I think I cried from like when I got back to my apartment till the morning. Because I felt like everything I worked so hard for could have been gone. And we can dive into that, but like the Lions were going to take me out to dinner the next night after the thing, and they called and canceled.
Oh no.
And so my agent told me, he goes, well, I know one team you're not going to.
The Lions.
The Lions. And I was like, okay, well, sweet. And then, you know, the Lions ended up taking me in the 4th round.
Talk about going into the draft, because this is just such a fall from grace, like being on the top of the mountain, having your best junior year, and then, you know, not playing as well as you probably could have, but your knees hurt, you know, you're going to get a chance. And then literally weeks before, being told by your agent, who's one of the best agents in the game, saying, hey, I really don't know if you're going to be able to draft. Because this happened. I mean, this happened to one of my friends too. He wasn't a highly touted player, but he pulled his hamstring in the 42, and like he's all but like no chance now. But someone like you to be told that, going from potential 1st round pick to possibly not getting drafted, still knowing like you're going to get an opportunity to make it, like to go to a team and prove yourself, but with your body kind of falling apart, like teams don't take that risk.
Right.
What was it like going and seeing, because I'm writing my book right now, and I've just wrote a chapter on my draft process, and like going and watching on TV, and it's really every kid that plays football, like that's the dream, is the draft, getting your name called. So what was the draft process like, and how did it shift of how you envisioned it? Did you have family over? Did you watch it on TV? And knowing now, like, it's not just, okay, I'm waiting in, you know, the first couple rounds. It's like, it could be anywhere in the draft and possibly not in the draft at all.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And so, you know, in college, you know, I probably never had more than, you know, 1,000 or 1,500 or whatever our scholarship check is. Like, you know, I never have had money. And, you know, when, you know, throughout college, you see like, oh, you know, even playing in the NFL, like I could not fathom that amount of money, because I've never had money. And, you know, we would sneak into like, you know, the chow hall just to get, you know, sneak extra meals so I wouldn't have to buy, you know, Chipotle down the street. And so I was
for
like,
$10.
Yeah, for $10. Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, man, this, you know, this was like, you know, not that, you know, it was all about the money, but it was like, this could be a dream come true. Not only the opportunity, but also the financial, you know, aspect and reward with it as well. And when I started hearing from my agent, when I signed with Drew, and when I interviewed with several other agencies, they're like, yeah, we think you'll all be a, you know, a 1st to 3rd round pick. And okay, I was like, well, worst case scenario, 3rd round picks are getting 800 to 600,000 signing bonus. Like that felt like $100 million to me as a college kid. I was like, I couldn't spend $800,000 if I tried. And so I was thinking like, and that's worst case scenario. I was like, this is such a massive dream come true. Like everything I've worked so hard for, you know, will come true. And being told, hey, you might not get drafted after and it wasn't like someone just told me that. Like I had years to process this information. It was like, hey, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I could fulfill my dream of playing in the NFL. And then when I finally feel like, okay, like I've kind of done, or not done it, but like and I won't even say earned it, but I have a really strong opportunity to get drafted in a decent position. To be told that, I mean, I broke down. I was an emotional wreck. I was gonna have, you know, originally I was gonna have a big draft day party, not a big draft party, but like my friends and close family, and you know, not what you see someone, you know, that's good, you know, is going to be a top 10 pick, but it was going to be a good day. I was scared of those days now, because now I was like, you're right. Most guys kind of know where they're going to go, but within a range. And I was like, I could go, probably won't go high anymore, but I could go maybe in like the 3rd or 4th round, or the worst case scenario, not at all. And so I only watched it with my parents, my brother, and then one of my best friends, shout out Alex Poe. We played on the line together in Miami in college, and we drove from Miami to Texas. He was like, I got nothing to do. I'll ride back with you and watch the draft with you. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so we watched every pick, just go through the deal. And the one team I did think I was going to go to was the Patriots, because Skarnecki, the Patriots O-line coach at the time, like when I met with him at the combine, he was like, I'm telling Bill, I'm telling everybody, like, you're my guy. I want to pick you. So tell me what we're going to do, or like, tell me where you're going to go, because I'm standing on the table for you. I was like, okay. And he's like, well, I told him 3rd round. I was like, I think I'll get taken at least in the third round. So he called me because back then it was the first day was round 1, day 2 was 2 and 3, day 3 was 4 through 6. So he called me after day 3 and he was like, all right, we have 2 picks in the 4th round. You're going to be one of them. I was like, awesome. So I was like, I'm going to be a Patriot. Their first pick, they take someone else. It's like, okay, my pick's coming up. It's coming up. It's coming up. I'm like, all right, this is going to be me. And right then they draft Aaron Hernandez.
Oh no!
And so which ended up being a good pick for him the first couple of years, and then it got messy. But
and then did he ever follow up with you?
I talked to him. He came my rookie year. We played the Patriots, and he came over and said hi and wished me luck, and said that there was concerns about injuries and they weren't going to take me.
Yeah, he's not the decision maker.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had a similar story with my draft. I was projected to be like a 7th round, maybe a free agent, like a priority free agent, and had a really good draft process. And I knew I was working up, but there's only a few teams that really like invested in like the draft process with me. It was the Eagles, the Bears, and who else? Eagles, Bears, and the Broncos. And so these 3 teams worked me out. And then the Broncos coach worked me out like a couple times. And they're the only team that actually gave me an interview at the combine. So some guys, I'm not sure how many interviews you had at the combine, probably a lot.
No, it really wasn't that many. It was like a few.
Handful.
Broncos were one of them, though.
Yeah. And that's a crazy process in itself.
Yeah.
Like walking into a room and having every major decision maker sitting in the hotel room with the cameras just like this. And it's like you sit down and like talk about, and I'd never had a job before. I never had to do a job interview.
Exactly.
And it's just like the biggest, most intense, like sweating. Like, am I saying the right thing? Like, holy cow. So anyways, I thought I was going to go to the Broncos. It was like a dream. And I knew they had in the 3rd round, they had the 80th pick. And that was the mountaintop. Like, that's the highest I can go.
Right.
It's like right there. And so I hung on to this dream. And the offensive line coach would like call me kind of periodically, and he loved me. And the same thing. He was like, you're my guy. We're rebuilding the offensive line, and I want you to be like the center anchor point of what we're doing. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'm watching the draft on that 3rd day, and it comes in the 80th picks comes up, and I'm like watching my phone. And then it was a center from Baylor, JD Walton. And
I played with JD. I know JD well.
So they drafted him, and I'm like, fuck. And the fact that it was a center was even like harder, because it was like, that could have been me. And he was only the 2nd center taken. So it was really like the odds of me getting taken there were slim. But what was really cool, after the 3rd round, a couple picks later, that coach actually called me afterwards. And he was like, hey man, I know we picked a center. I tried to get you there, but we're going to take you with our next pick in the 4th round. Because we know like either you or JD can both play inside positions, and we're rebuilding the interior. And I'm like, okay. And the fact that he did that was really cool.
Yeah.
Like, dang, like this is a guy, and there's, playing in the NFL now for 8 years and being involved in organizations, there's not a lot of that open communication like that. And so I was like, okay, cool. So they had like end of the 4th round, like 130 something, and ended up going through, and like, I didn't even think the Falcons like were interested in me at all. And it was like kind of a surprise at 117. But yeah, it's really cool. The fact that the guy was telling you, I can't believe he didn't follow up with you though.
Yeah. No, he didn't call me after that, but we did talk about it, and I believed him. And it's actually hindsight 2020. It was a major blessing.
Why is that?
Because I spent a lot of my career injured. I was the day 1 starter 5 out of my 6 years, and but I never played a whole season. I always got hurt. I just couldn't. I couldn't stay healthy. And the Lions really invested in draft picks. They stuck by me through a lot of injuries that I don't think a lot of teams would, and I don't think the Patriots would. The Patriots, our draft class, they cut their 3rd round pick. I think it was their 2nd or 3rd round pick they cut. It was like a big surprise. Like
after his rookie training camp?
After his rookie training camp.
Wow, that's so rare.
So rare.
Must have been some type of attitude.
There might have been
thing.
some attitude. Yeah, that's the only reason. It couldn't have been, because they'll invest in you from a talent perspective. But the Patriots were kind of known for that. Like, they'll keep undrafted guys, but if you're a 4th round pick isn't safe with the Patriots. Like they're a little bit different.
And so going to the Lions, getting your name called on draft day by the Lions after they canceled your dinner, how did that feel?
I was just excited because I was thrilled because it was an opportunity. It was a foot in the door. I always viewed it as like, this is a starting place, but it was also such a relief that I didn't go from, I got drafted, just essentially as simple as that, is because that my fear was I'm just not going to get drafted, or I'm going to go 7th round, and I'm, a 7th round signing bonus is what, 25 grand, and they didn't really invest in you, so you still have to fight and claw. And so
how much was your signing bonus?
So you said yours, and it was very close to that. I was actually able, this was the last year you were able to do this. I did a 3-year deal.
Oh, wow.
So it was just over 300,000, because you said yours was 420.
Yeah, something like that. For me, 470.
I think it was 470.
I think it's 470. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause mine would have been 420. And so I think I did, 315, and my agent's calling me and he's like, all right, so we're going to do a 3-year deal. You have to give up $105,000 though. I was like, wait, what? I didn't really get the whole thing, because I got to remember at this time, I don't know how it was for you, but I was like, $100,000.
Yeah.
That is,
but paying $100,000 to get into free agency a year earlier is so worth it.
It's so worth it. And it ended up working out, because they tenured me my after my 3rd year, and that what I made my 4th year would have been a lot more. It was a lot more than what I would have made.
How much was it?
I believe it was 1.6.
And that was because you got tagged, franchise?
No, it's tenured, which they can do an original round tenure, which is basically the redheaded stepchild of a franchise tag. So they can slap, because you can't even do this anymore, because it's because how it was in 2010 was the last year, because when you drafted a player, you had their rights for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they still had my rights, but we didn't have a contract. So they could give you a 1st round tenure or original round tenure. And they gave me original round, which basically means, because if they don't offer me first, then I could become a free agent. But if they slap one of those 2 things on you, you're basically stuck with it, but they have to give you one of those 2 things. And so they gave me that, and I was like, I probably would have made 600,000 if I was
extra $1 million. Yeah,
it was
10x investment.
Yeah. So it was
was that a 3-year deal your agent's idea? Not your idea?
It was not my idea.
Okay.
It was not my idea.
So they knew what they were doing.
Because they even told me, they're like, Jason, 3 teams even offer this, because most teams want your rights in case you're good. And he was like, we highly recommend you play this. I was like, okay, but it's $100,000.
But it's perfect for you, someone that if you go in and prove yourself, going from a 1st round pick to a 4th round, shortening that deal, getting to that big money sooner.
Right. Exactly. And it worked out. And, I was probably comfortable with it, an hour into the conversation, but just the first time they told me, hey, we're going to give back a 4th year signing bonus. The one thing I was clinging on to, trying to oh, actually I won't just be broke anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so got a 3-year deal originally, and had an opportunity with the Lions. So
take us through your NFL career. What are some of the highlights? I mean, you said you were injured a bunch. It wasn't the career that you had envisioned for yourself. Obviously, take us through some of the highlights of your career and how it felt playing in the NFL, and then coming towards the end. We'll get into that.
Yeah, so it was. I'll say this, it was a dream come true. Playing in the NFL was a lifelong dream I had, since I was, a small child. Everybody's conception of the NFL is probably different than what it really is, right? Because everybody thinks they see the contracts on TV and they think everybody makes that. And it's like, well, that's probably 4 guys on the team make that.
Yeah, the top 5% of the locker room.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody else is, on a minimum deal for their age or contract. But no, it was great. The locker room in Detroit was incredible. I played 4 years there. We had I love my offensive line coaches. I had George Yarno, RIP. He had cancer and has passed since. And then Jeremiah Washburn, who's now the D-line coach of the Eagles. And they both invested a ton in me, and I'm so thankful for them.
You played with Gosder Sherless?
I did.
Who was the right tackle? You were left tackle? Is that how it worked? Or?
So it was, Goz was our right tackle. And then, my rookie year, I was swing. It's a deal. But But yeah, I was either the swing or I started some games at left, started some games at right. But I played actually, so Gaz was only there, I believe, my rookie year. And then he left. And then I started some right tackle some years after that. But
did you play with Joe Farrier at all?
I did.
Yeah.
The tight end, yeah.
I had him on my podcast too. His story is crazy.
So he was there. He was an undrafted free agent my 4th year there, my last year in Detroit. And dude, he was. How do you know Joe? That's a small.
No, we just connected, dude. Yeah, like we probably just connected through mutual friends, like 3 months ago, and then he was going to be in Austin too. I was like, let's do a podcast together, and we dropped in. And yeah, so if you're listening to this podcast, you want to listen to the show, it's a really great episode. So go check it out. I think it's like episode 2 or 3. But tell me about your perspective of Joe, so we can paint the picture of somebody else that was on the team, of him coming in his rookie year, because he talks about that year and being an undrafted guy and like trying to earn the respect of the team and then becoming this kind of like larger than life character.
The larger than life character is the best way to describe him, because just kind of the Detroit way. Like Calvin Johnson was on the team, and I can tell you, I will sing that man's praises forever, because one of the biggest celebrities, or one of the the best athletes, one of the best wide receivers of all time, most down to earth guy. He was my next door neighbor, and he was the kind of guy that would help you carry in your groceries, and just the most humble dude in the world. Didn't say much, but was built like an avatar and could run and catch and jump through the roof. And Joe was this louder than life personality, so it was like a very different like cultural thing there. But he backed it up. I mean, there was one game he had 3 catches and 3 touchdowns, and I was like, and so he knew he had his stuff to him. Like he knew he could play, and he would tell you about it. And that I think that initially maybe rubbed the older guys kind of a little funny, but I think everybody ended up loving him and respecting him, because he had production on the field. So it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah, when young guys come in, if they act like their shit don't stink, it's very, like we had a guy come in, I remember in Atlanta, he was there less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
Because he came in, they signed him. He's the undrafted guys. If you come in with a loud mouth, like they don't give a fuck. They're like, get the fuck out of here, especially if you start rubbing the older guys the wrong way. But you go in, it's hard to earn the respect, especially in the early training camp. But then you slowly start going. And then as soon as you make the team, things shift. And then as soon as you're a player who is contributing, you can earn that respect really quickly. And then it's like, okay, like welcome, you're one of us now. But it takes, you got to really show up to be able to earn that.
You said it better than I could, because he walked in like his shit didn't stink as an undrafted free agent. And, that's tough, because I just told you earlier in the podcast that Detroit really invested in draft picks. Like, unlike, there was a lot of teams like the Colts, the Patriots, a lot of other teams I saw like where it was common for undrafted free agents to make the team. We hadn't had one in my 3 years there. And so not a lot of people, and that was that year we had him and one other guy, both undrafted, made the team. And then, once you make the team, like you said, you kind of, you earn people's respect. And then, we started, he was 6'7", and he walked like a giraffe. He was so goofy, man. He had this larger than life personality, but we started drawing up plays for him because he kept getting open and catching the ball. So he was an asset for us. And I think he went somewhere else after that year, because I think he was just on, I don't remember how or why that happened. But so he was only there a year, but he had a lot of production.
Okay, so you went from Detroit, then you went down to Miami. Talk about that transition. What happened there?
Yep. So I was a free agent after my 4th year. Still, I think, again, I was in a precarious situation, because, the film I did have, I think it was, good enough and good, I wasn't mauling people like Trent Williams, like you said, but I was, playing, at a decent level. It's just, I was hurt a lot. I got hurt. I had a Liz Frank my 2nd year. I tore my other knee. I tore my left knee in college. I tore my same thing, patella tendon, exact same. It was like just the way my knees developed. Same exact thing. It was deja vu. I had that happen my 3rd year. My 4th year, I just kept. I started most of the 4th year there, but I just had little nicks and things that, that I was just battling. And so it was the question in every GM's mind is like, could I stay healthy? I had two teams really interested in me, the Chiefs and the Dolphins. And I went and visited the Chiefs, and when I went and visited the Chiefs, the Dolphins offered me more money. Or like they upped their offer. And so I flew directly to the Dolphins and signed with them.
How much was the contract worth?
It wasn't a lot. It was just 2 years, and it was barely seven figures, right? Like 7 figures each year.
Like $1 million?
Yeah. So yeah, it was. So actually, I take that back. It was a 1 year deal.
With like a team option or something?
No, it was a 1 year deal for $1 million. I think it was like, yeah, I think it was just over $1 million. And then after that year, they gave me a 2 year deal for around 3, and then they cut me after that year.
So that was like a 1 year prove it deal, and then they gave it to you. So then you're going towards your last year in the NFL. So what was the end like coming up towards the end of your career? Was it something that you had been contemplating for a while? And what happened with that?
So my envision of my career was like, hey, what everybody's probably is, I'm going to play 10 years. I'm an amazing career. I'm going to be, all pro left tackle. And then I'm going to, go out on top. When I got to Miami, I was starting to realize, I was like, maybe this isn't where I'm meant to be. Like, I keep getting hurt, and I told you I've never gotten hurt before, and it was just an injury bug that he couldn't shake. And it wasn't like everybody's like, well, just spend more time in the training room, or spend more time prehabbing, or working out, or stretching, or yoga, or whatever. I did everything. I cared about hydration. I was doing every little thing I could try to do. And when your body starts compensating because your knee hurts, and then that just puts more pressure on your hips and ankles and everything else. And I was like, okay, well, and then what finally happened, or what added to that, was I started dealing with some heart problems. My last year in with the Dolphins, and that was the reason why they cut me, which got to a whole legal thing.
What was the legal thing? Like them cutting you for injury and not paying you?
Right. So I started 15 of the 16 games my last year with the Dolphins, and I went into irregular rhythms in 14 of them. So after every game, I was getting either cardioverted or taking heart medicine to try to get my back into sinus rhythm. And that was kind of a scary thing on its own, right? And so the team calls me. It's in the off season. It's probably late January or maybe January, February. I don't remember exactly. And the team doctor calls me, and he says, hey, before next season, we recommend you get a heart surgery. I was like, okay. He's like, this will help you. You won't have to deal with this next year. I was like, okay, cool. No problem. He's like, yeah, I'll book everything. And you can go in, and it's not open heart surgery. It's not as scary as it sounds. We can go in through a scope, and we just burn off little pieces of your heart that are basically, your heart grows extra muscles. And when those contract, it throws off your whole rhythm. He's like, all we do is just burn those little extra muscles that aren't supposed to be there. It's not as scary as it sounds. I was like, okay, cool. And about an hour later, the GM calls me and goes, hey, we're going to let you go. I was like, does this have to do with my heart surgery? He's like, no, not at all. I was like, okay. And so, yeah, I took him to court over that.
How'd that go? How'd that process go?
They settled. I got a little something out of it, but, because you can't cut someone when you're hurt, right?
Yeah. That's what's fucked up, dude. Because when I blew my knee out my 5th year and I came back for my 6th year, it was an 11-month recovery. Training camp started at 9 months of the recovery. But I wanted to play and start. So I had to go in and sign all the papers and, clear me to play. Like, I'm good, coach. I can go play. I'm like 80%, but I'm trying to prove myself and the team that I'm able to go. And I get to a point where they test my knee because they slowly ramped up my plays as each day went on. And then I had this one day where it was basically we're going to test your knee. You're going to do a full practice. And it was really hurting. And then, a week later they cut me.
Yeah.
And it's because I signed all the papers and everything, is
they did that on, I don't know what they meant they did or didn't do, but that's what's so tough about this, is because I've had this exact conversation but you only really have it with former NFL players or NFL players, because as a player, as an athlete, as a competitor, you want to play and you want to contribute and you want to get back out there, and you the value you have, and you want to communicate that value. It's like, look, I deserve to be here. But then they force you to like, well, give away all your rights to try to say that. And that's just such a broken model that every team operates in. And because I mean, every other, this opens up a whole nother bag of worms and a much longer conversation, but like every other professional sport has guaranteed contracts. So you don't have to deal with this stuff. And football, the injury rate is 100%. So you're going to get hurt, but okay, tell me that you're healthy and then we can cut you. I've seen guys, I've heard a lot of stories of guys that they know they're going to get cut or think they're going to get cut. After that fourth preseason game, they go slam their freaking ankle in a door or something because they know it's like, you can't cut me now. And that's just such a...
Dude, I talked to one of the fullbacks I play with. His name's Michael Cox.
Yeah.
And I just talked to him probably a year or two ago now, but it was after all of this and both our careers were over. And I was just catching up with him. And he told me this story that I didn't know about at the time, but he was our fullback. And fullback's an interesting position because there's such a small roster. If a fullback gets like a 4 to 6 week injury, it's hard because you need that roster spot. And fullback is like a pretty unique position. They can play special teams, but they're not playing every play of the game. They're playing maybe 10, 15 snaps if you run that type. Yeah, if that. And so for a hurt fullback to take up a roster spot is like a no-go. And so he rolled he had a high ankle sprain, I think like mid training camp. And he was, we're going into season and he was going to be hurt for like 3 to 4 weeks. And I remember he told me the GM called him up and said, "Hey, we're in talks with the Texans right now. We need a cornerback. They need a fullback, and we're working out a trade. But I just need to know that you're healthy. Like, are you healthy?" And he's like, "Yes, coach, I'm healthy. I'm ready to go. Like, thank you." And he leaves that meeting like, "Okay, cool. Like, I'm gonna get an opportunity." Literally 20 minutes later, he gets called back up. He's like, "Hey, the trade fell through, but I have on camera here you saying that you're healthy. So we're going to go ahead and release you and we don't owe you any money."
That's so scumbaggy.
Isn't that fucked up?
That's fucked up. I hate that.
Because because they were going to release him anyway.
Right.
But because
that was all
the 4 weeks, right?
I don't even believe there was ever a trade there. And I know that's what you're implying, but like.
Totally. And just like, so the 4 weeks, like if they would have cut him injured, there's a thing called an injury settlement. So if it's a 4 week injury, then they would have owed him, if they would have cut him anyway because they need the roster spot, they would have owed him 4 game checks, which could be anywhere from 20 grand to 80 grand a week.
A week, yeah.
And so they basically don't have to pay him that money and he's out. And this is a fullback that hadn't made a ton of money. So it's like, that's a lot of money to just fuck a guy over for an organization that's worth $1 billion.
It always blew my mind how much organizations spent, but how cheap they were at the same time.
Dude, tell me about it. What's the biggest thing for you? Because like I was blown away how little, like with the nutrition specifically. Atlanta was pretty good. When I went down to Tampa, the food that they were feeding us, like these high performing athletes, I'm like, dude, get us like the highest quality food. What the fuck are we doing?
You stole the words out of my mouth because in Miami, it was actually first class. I mean, it was what I would envision if I was a 13-year-old kid. Like, well, wonder what an NFL building facilities like. We had shake stations. They had full salad bars, fruit bar. You had fruit you could only get in like Asia or something. Like it had everything. You had a full sandwich station, pasta station, that all separate from the buffet line. And then 24 hours a day, if you wanted a burger or something, you could go get it. Like it was just the nutrition there. We had sports science, first class, everything. Like Miami did it right. Detroit, okay, you just paid Stafford $100 million. You just paid Calvin $100 million. You just paid Sue a ton of money. You invested in all these players and you're feeding literally like stuffed crushed DiGiorno's and chicken nuggets in a buffet line. Like the worst food, like food that a lot of moms wouldn't feed their kids because it's just like whatever. I was like, this is you invest that much in these players and then you feed them this. And not even that, like just our equipment in the rooms. Like we're trying to watch film on like 12-year-old computers that look like they look so old, and you're like, how is this even running right now? Like, it's like, we got to wait for this thing to load. I was like, why?
We're professionals. Dude, what are we doing?
What? Like I know what this franchise is worth. I know how much money, they bring in. How come like.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I think one of the things that blew my mind too is some of the teams, because when you're on the East Coast or the West Coast, usually when you travel across coast, you leave on Friday as opposed to Saturday before the game. So you have a little bit of time to acclimate because the time change. There were some teams, I think it was I think the Bengals or the Steelers, and I'm not sure if they still do this, but I heard stories of when they do long travel trips, they would still leave on Saturday because it's a whole extra day in a hotel, which with the, housing a whole team in a hotel is like a couple $100,000.
You're right.
And so they're trying to save a couple $100,000 by not going out there. And it's like, you're literally affecting the performance of the product that's making you the money. It's fascinating.
So, what's funny is, it's funny how owners think about the business of football, right? Stephen Ross bought the Dolphins from Huizenga Holdings. The president at Huizenga Holdings is a really close friend of mine. And when I got to Miami, it was already bought by Stephen Ross, but I got to know him through just a bunch of connections. And he would talk about like the groups, what they would talk about with the Dolphins, because it's a holding company. It owned a ton of companies. And basically what they would do is they would try to buy a company, add value, then flip it and sell it for more. And they did a great job with the Dolphins. They bought it for $300 million, sold it for $1 billion. They should have held on to a couple more years because then they could have sold it for $3 or $4 billion. But he told me, he's like, I remember one meeting we were talking about the Dolphins. He said, these are our top 10 priorities for this season. He's like, guess where winning was on that list, Jason? Take a guess.
7.
It was seventh most important thing.
That's insane.
List. Like, what
was like the top
parking
3?
Was above it. Like, hey, we need to optimize like making more money in parking. It was concession. Everything was revenue based. The only one that wasn't was winning. And he was like, guys, if we win, it solves all of this.
Yeah.
Like, we can charge way more for tickets. We can charge way more for parking. We can charge way more for this.
And you just go to the playoffs and you're making a whole nother game. Because you only have 8 home games. If you can get another home playoff game, and that will increase your revenue by 15% or whatever, just because that, at least from the stadium costs.
Exactly. And so it's such a wild thing that the ownership of a football team would say, okay, we're going to prioritize winning at 7th. That's just mind blowing to me, but that's how they operate.
Yeah, man, fascinating. So you have this heart condition. How was like dealing with something like that? It's one thing breaking a bone, tearing a knee. You're like, okay, like my body's healing. The heart is an organ that you need to survive. So did you ever have confrontations of what if this goes bad? Am I possibly going to die, or was it just like settled enough where it's just football?
It grew. So we probably didn't even elaborate on it. I'll do a little bit now of like how much I told you, like I cried all night, but how much like mentally and how stressed and like where my mental health was, going into football, because just so much fears of like, is this going to become a reality? And I kind of dealt with something very similar, maybe even a little bit bigger, my last couple years in leaving the game, because I had my first heart episode was early in my career in Detroit. Like, I just felt off. I can't give a better explanation than that. Like, I just didn't feel right. I was dizzy. I was lightheaded all the time. And I went in the training room and they're like, well, your heart's not, it's beating funny. And maybe that has something to do with it. And so it was a thing that I had early in my career, but it was crazy because when I was like so worried about it, they were like, we have like 6 other guys on the team dealing with the same thing. And then my O-line coach was so cool about it, Joe Giarno, who played 14 years in the league. He was like, I had that when I played too. Our tight ends coach, he was like, I'm dealing with that currently. And I was like, oh, this is like a popular thing. Like, it's not a big deal. So I wasn't really that worried about it. But then it started happening more and more frequently. It started happening, it happened one time that year, and it might have happened twice the next year. And then it started happening a couple of times. And I told you in the last game, it started happening in every game and even a lot of practices. Because every time you go into it, your body becomes more likely to go into it again. It's like your body starts adapting to it. And there's a lot of people out in the world living with right now that have no idea that they'll go in and out of it, because it's just, if they feel lightheaded after a day of drinking, or if they're old or whatever, it's just something that people do. So that wasn't the big concern. But the concern, and the reason why I actually had to stop playing, because after my 6th year, when the Dolphins released me, I had teams offer me contracts, but I just couldn't pass a physical because, I just had heart surgery. I'm fresh off of heart surgery. And there's this thing called an injection fraction. And it's basically simplified into how much of your heart fills with blood, like the percentages, is what percent of your heart fills with blood before it pumps. In a normal, healthy, I was probably 28 at the time, is like normal, healthy 28-year-old, it's in the 60s or high 50s. And mine was measured at 35. And that was one of the main reasons why the Dolphins said they cut me, is like, they're like, you have heart disease. Like 35 injection fraction is like a 90-year-old chain smoker their whole life. Like it's really, really,
Wow.
really bad. And so that was really scary. I was like, hey, do I have heart disease? And like, will my heart ever recover from this? Because they were like, because when you're a baby, you have like a 90% heart injection fraction. And then when the older you get, it just goes down slowly year over year. Because your heart gets bigger, and then it just,
not as strong.
It's just not as strong or as effective every year you age. And so they're like, it never really goes back up. And that was the scary thing to me. I was like, I'm a young guy. I'm in my 20s. Like, I got to live a whole life here. So that was the part that was really scary, both with football and like what happens after football. And so when that was in my report, and so when every team looked at it, it was like, you have an injection fraction at 35? Like, we can't sign you. Like, you could die on the field. Like, what if something happened? Like, your heart doesn't really work. So football kind of got ended. And then
how did that feel to confront that? Not just the death, but like, oh, this is ending my career. It's like, this is obviously not the way you envisioned ending your career. It's a heart issue.
Right. It's a really good question, because when it happened, luckily I had a disability policy, a tiny one, but it paid. And when, before all this, I was like, okay, well, when I started learning about this, like once I learned it's not heart disease, and like, this is just related to like, because every time you go into, I had atrial fib. Every time you go into atrial fib, your heart weakens a little bit. And they're like, this is just you going in and out of atrial fib 100 times. This is all that's caused by. So you don't have any like underlying heart disease. I was like, okay, that's good.
So rest your heart. The idea is rest your heart, and then it'll kind of normalize.
Well, they said it'll stop, but basically I was like, okay, well, when I'd visited 4 teams, and all 4 teams failed me on the physical. I visited the Giants, the Titans. I take that back. Those are the only 2 teams I visited, and I had 4 offers total. But when I realized, okay, it's like, all right, these teams are failing me. Maybe I should go see my own doctor. So I went to like one of the top cardiologists in the world, and I was like, am I safe to play football? And he was like, maybe. Like, he's like, honestly, you got to ask yourself, like, how many years do you have left? And I was like, in football, he's like, 1 or 2. He's like, look at where your injection fraction has gone every single year. And it was just a declining slope. He's like, do you really want to go lower than 35? And that's when he asked me that. He's like, this is not, you're not on a good trajectory right now. And like, your quality of life could go severely downhill. And is 1 more year of football or 2 more years of football worth that? And I was like, man, you're right. And so at that moment, I thought I had a little bit of peace with it. And what I told myself, and what I had a lot of time to think about it, I was like, this makes it easier, because I wasn't told, hey, you're not good enough. Like, hey, they still want me. This was taken away from me. So there's nothing I can do about it. I have peace with that. And that lasted for about a week because it got a lot, like, I think that made it a lot harder. I was like, this is not something I did. It's like, I thought that would make it easier. It made it harder. Like, I did all the right things. I trained the right way. I worked hard. I did all the necessary steps, and it still didn't work out.
The natural question is why did this happen to me?
Why? And yeah, exactly. Why? And, then you start looking back at my career. I was like, well, why did I have to have a Liz Frank or blow out my knee, or why did like this happen? Is like, cause I start, you see locker rooms. It's like, did you see what so-and-so got with so-and-so team? And I'm like, it's like that scene in, what movie is that? Superbad is like, oh, shouldn't have been that drunk. I shouldn't have hooked up with that guy. We could have been that mistake. Every time, that was our joke. It's like every time we saw someone get paid, it's like, I could have been that mistake.
Yeah. But we weren't.
But we weren't. So, And so, dealing with that, of
Never
like,
getting the big deal.
never getting the big deal, always staying hurt. That was this thing in the back of my brain, this pain in my side that just never went away. It was like, I could still be out there. I could still, this thing you've been doing your whole life, this game you loved, it's, and I never thought like this was a part of me or this was my identity. I really didn't think that because I've seen other guys struggle and leaving the game. And I was like, oh, I'll never be that way. And I was like, oh, this is, I'm Jason. I'm a Christian. These are my morals. These are my values. But I was like, football is what I do. It's not who I am. And then that really gets put to the test because people start treating you different. You start looking at yourself different. The thing you've done for the last 20 years is not what you do anymore.
What were the biggest challenges? What were like the initial thing that you didn't think would be a challenge that was really confronting when you started going through it?
Well, there was a lot of life changes. In the matter of like a month, I was told I need heart surgery. I was cut from my team. I got heart surgery. So I'm like trying to figure out how to recover from that. I moved back to Texas. So I left. The girl I was dating for 3 years at the time, we just broke up. A friend group that I used to hang out with all the time, I stopped hearing from. And I'm married now. I'm married a month, so that was a really, really good positive thing that came out of that. But
I have a question just with the partner. Did she break up? Was the breakup having to do anything with you no longer being a professional athlete?
No, I don't think it was directly related to that. I just think it was just timing of a lot of things.
Yeah. A lot of things moving.
A lot of different things moving, and I don't know. Maybe it was, but maybe it wasn't. I
asked just because mine was really tied to that. I mean, just being confronted with when I decided it was time to retire. My fiance at the time was not supportive of that decision.
Yeah.
Which kind of made me realize, oh crap, it's not just my identity that I'm attached to. It's the people in my life that are supposed to love me the most are attached to my identity as a football player as well. And breaking down that story is like, it's not just
that's tough.
Me, it's the people, it's the way I'm viewed by the world. It's really a challenging experience that you can't prepare for.
That's tough. We got to unpack that too. But yeah, and that's what I meant by even like friend groups and her and like people in your life thought it was funny too. Cause like there were certain restaurants that like I'd gone to forever that would always like, oh, well, it's on the house, or we took care of you this time, or oh, you'd show up and they're like, oh, don't worry about a reservation, we had you, and it was literally like overnight. They're like, oh yeah, it's like an hour wait. Really, and you're just like, and that's like a really simple example because it's easy to tell that story, but like imagine that, but with like every connection in your life, right? And even people close to you, like you mentioned, like your fiance, like friends that I thought were like true friends. And like they look at me differently now. Like I'm a civilian now. And that weighs on your mind so much. And then even like the way you look at yourself, because there's a lot as a man waking up every morning and saying, okay, this is what I do. I'm contributing to society by doing this. I have my day doing this. I have a routine. I'm used to these things. And now you're waking up and you're just, oh, I'm not really contributing to society right now. Like it's not a conscious thought, but you're just at home with your thoughts and you're just thinking like, well, what am I going to do today? And you just sit there and you feel it. None of it's conscious, but you kind of feel worthless. And you're like, why am I just sitting here? Why am I like, what do I do now? And then you start all the fears of like, what does the future look like? What am I going to do next? Like, does this end well for me? And the combination of all of those things are really, really, really tough. Like I was in a dark place for a long time, for the greater part of a year. Like I didn't have the energy to get out of bed. I questioned a lot of things.
What were some of those questions that you had?
There's like simple practical questions. Okay, like what do I do now? Or like where should I go? Or what's the next step? And there's also questions like, is this even like like worth it anymore? Like, am I ever going to be happy again? Am I ever going to find value in life again? Like all the people that were close to me, I thought, really cared about me and loved me. And it's like, they even treat you different. And so like you're, the enemy starts talking to you at that point and just makes you feel even more worthless than you felt. And
did you have anybody in your life at this point that was supportive? What was your support system like through this year?
It was probably a lot of, I've always had a very, very supportive family. My parents are incredibly supportive. I have a brother that's awesome.
But are you like living alone?
I was
like
living
dealing
alone
with this stuff, kind of like in isolation.
Living alone at the time, and I've since tried. I think I've gotten better at this, but this time is like when I used to struggle, I used to isolate. That was like my coping mechanism. Was like, but that wasn't very healthy because like you didn't really have a support system if you go isolate. And that was like, oh, it's not their problem, it's my problem. I'll just deal with it.
Were there certain ways that you coped? Would you ever get into drinking too much or pain pills or anything like that?
I was drinking like every day. And I still had my stashes of all the great pills from the locker room days. So self-medicating. I wouldn't say that like, I was like, I definitely was drinking way more probably than I ever have in my life, but I wasn't like blacking out every night.
Yeah, it wasn't like destructive.
Yeah.
I mean, you could like normalize it in that state of like, I'm just doing this because there's nothing else to do. It wasn't like this, like I'm trying to kill myself with the booze kind of thing.
That's the best way to describe it, is because like, you're sitting at home and,
bored.
Bored is a big part of it. And then you're like, having a cocktail will, put a smile on my face. And so, that was a really tough year because of all the things I mentioned. And then even like what got real tough was football season. Because like we just talked about all the personal stuff, is like, I was like, because, when you're in college or you're a rookie and you're like, oh man, like you're especially like in high school and when you're young, like football is like the greatest game and you just love it so much. And you're like, high school, you play the game for free. Like
I remember having that thought. Like, what's the big deal about it? I play this game for the rest of my life for free because I love it so much.
Yeah. And then you like after a couple of years, and this is what I said earlier about the public's perception of it, is that it becomes a job real quick.
Yeah.
And is what the game you used to play for free or for free education. Well, now college players get paid, but when we played, college players, did it for books and for an education. And then it's like, well, I'm not playing for that. Like I deserve this. Like, I don't know if it's even worth playing if I'm not getting this. And you start thinking of those thoughts and that game, when football season came on, I couldn't watch it. Like if I was somewhere where a game was on, it was really, really, really tough to watch. Because
what did it bring up within you?
I think the two biggest thoughts were, I should be out there. Like, why am I here? Why am I not out there? Why did this happen? Is like all those kind of thoughts too. And it was just like, and it too, it just kind of, so it was like, why did this happen type responses. And B, it was like, this is what I've done for my whole life. And like, I just don't want to be reminded of that. Like, this is not helping my transition right now. Like the thoughts of why shouldn't I be there and why shouldn't I be that? It's like that it's not helping me move forward at all.
So this year that you went through with the really dark period, was it like a rock bottom experience that brought you out of it? How did you end up moving through it? Was it just time that healed, or was there some help that you sought out, or how did you end up processing and kind of finding new ground to stand on?
It was rock bottom.
What did rock bottom look like? How did that take place?
Rock bottom can mean a lot of different things to different people. I felt like I didn't have any friends anymore. I told you that my relationship ended. I was in a new city, no work, all that stuff. And so like that, and just how I felt like emotionally, spiritually, mentally, like I felt worthless and like lost like the love of life is probably the best way to phrase that. Um, I think, everybody's different, but I have a faith, and I think that was when I stopped trying to tackle it alone and in isolation and staying like, well, you know, God's not going to lead me through this. Like he has a plan for my life. Like I don't know what it is, but I need to start trusting that and he's sovereign. Like that started the process of like recovery and like back to normalcy. I met like my best friends in my life today, I met during that period, which is wild. Like, groomsmen in my wedding. My brother was my best man, but several of the groomsmen in my wedding were people I met in that period.
Where did you meet him at? Was it at church or these?
Well, I have one friend named Summit, and I met him randomly. So I live in Fort Worth. There's a Colonial golf tournament there, and we were both following the same golfer. We noticed that for a couple holes, and he was like, "Hey, are you following so and so?" I said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, cool. I'm Jason." And he's like, "Oh, I'm Summit." And he was like, we were just talking all that day, and then I think we grabbed lunch like the day after that or something. Just like, "Oh, you're cool. I'll grab a burger with you." And we joke because everybody that's Summit's friends, we all say that he's such a personable connector that most of our friends were because introductions from Summit. He's just a connector, and so like he introduced me to his whole friend group. I mean, and so like. And they were all really great people. And, a lot of them are, still some of my closest friends today. And so
that's beautiful, man. Talk about it, because that's like these synchronicities that happen, right? Like that randomly in a golf tournament, meeting somebody that leads you into meeting more people that really help bring you out in a way from this dark period and feeling seen, heard, loved again. I'm sure a big part of this, because you're talking about your faith and your connection to this greater powers that be and having a trust and faith in that. But a big part of where you were hitting rock bottom was this questioning, why is this happening to me? I'm sure there's a point like, God, why? Like we had a plan, I was doing it. Why did you do this to me? And so there's a lot of resentment and anger towards the very thing because it's hard to connect with that when you feel resentment towards it. And so how did you process that and then reconnect with that faith and start to trust the process again?
Yeah, I don't think like I ever like lost my faith, right? Like, but it was a lot of questions of why. But, I started to realize is like, God's done so much for me in my life. And the fact that he didn't give me every single thing and take me all the way to the top of the mountain. He still took me pretty far up the mountain. Right. And
we got pretty far.
We got pretty far.
Thanks, God.
And so, and not that, I don't think like we can measure God's love for us about like how far he takes us in our athletic careers, right? Like he's done so much for me.
And a lot of time the biggest challenges in our life that we could say, why did this happen to me, turn out to be the biggest blessings.
Exactly. That I haven't even had like kind of like where I really grew my relationship with God was in Detroit. And so like I think he had a plan to get me there. Where I became where I became even stronger was through this whole draft, through leaving the game of football. I met my wife because of, a conversation about faith. And so, but then also I started realizing other things too. Like, as I started this kind of road from rock bottom, like there's a lot of, it could have been taken from me so much earlier. Right. Like, I don't know if my brother will listen to this, when I share it, but my brother was twice the high school athlete I was. He was built very different. He was, a hair shorter than me, but he played wide receiver, right? And he could run and jump, and I was running 4.9s, he was running like 4.4s, and so like he could do it all. He was one of the best high school baseball players in the state of Texas. During the lockout, I went to most of his games, and I think for his first like 11 games, he had 10 home runs. He was batting had like a 600 batting average. He had half the pro teams calling the house. Like he was totally be this top. He committed he had football offers. He could go anywhere he wanted in baseball. And his senior year in high school, I was at the game. He ripped one off the wall, just walked to first base. And he got a pinch runner because his back was killing him. And I went over there and did the big brother thing and told him to stop being such a bitch. Like I was like, you
pussy.
Yeah, I was like, you pulled a muscle in your back. Like you're fine. You're embarrassing me. Stop. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. I didn't think I said that last part, but I was like, dude, you're fine. Like you'll be fine. And the trainer told me, he's like, yeah, he's got to pull a muscle. I was like, oh my gosh, dude, you're today's generation, right? No, but and then he kept getting ice and stim on his back for like 2 weeks and was missing games because he couldn't play. And I was like, wow, dude, just ridiculing this poor guy. We finally took him to a real doctor and he's like, yeah, he broke his spine in 2 places. And he's like, he needs to have his back fused and he can never play sports again. And A, it made me feel like a shitty brother. And B, we took him to 2 more doctors and the second doctor said the same thing. And the third doctor was like, well, let's just make him wear a back brace for, he needs to live in a back brace for 6 months and maybe it can kind of heal on its own. And so, I mean, he ended up still trying to do the baseball route, but he could never swing a bat again. Like it always killed him. And so like, there's just so many things. It could have been a car crash. It could have been a high school injury. It could have been, so many other things that for me to sit there and complain about why me, and I had a 6-year NFL career. Like I realized like it could have been a lot better, but it could have been a heck of a lot worse.
So that was it then going through that year, was it just widening your perspective that the time was like, okay, what am I actually like? I need to pull myself out of this and start focusing on, I have a lot of life left to live. I got a lot of opportunity ahead of me, and just putting things into perspective in that way. I accomplished a lot. Now it's time to accomplish something else.
I think that's better than that. Cause it wasn't like just that my brother's example, like, wow, like this was the great revelation, but like looking back at that, but it was like, I'm 28 years old, right? Like most people, I mean, the NFL it's such a wild industry because if you retire at 28, like you had a decent career.
Yeah, totally. You're an old guy.
You're an old guy at 28. Yeah. And so, realizing, okay, like I have, the majority of my life left, hopefully. And so like I can still write the majority of my book. This is like a next chapter. There'll probably be multiple next chapters. And so that was kind of like the realization that was like, okay, it's not over. Stop sulking. You have, you can still reinvent your life of wherever you want it at this point.
And so then that led you into entrepreneurship. Talk us about the genesis of this story that you had, or this idea that you had like 5 or 6 years earlier with this earbuds thing.
Yeah.
Talk about the genesis of where going from this dark period of your life into business.
Yeah. So, I had a friend of mine saying, hey, you want to be, I'm working for the startup. You want to work for it? I was like, yeah, sure. And like through like the interview process and, starting to slowly help out this startup, it was a sensor for helmets. It was like, you put this little sensor on a football helmet or on a lacrosse helmet or any type of hockey helmet, and it could measure G-force impact. And I was like, this is a cool thing. So I learned a lot. I learned for, helping out this startup for like 6 weeks. I learned about how I was like, startups are really, really fascinating, really cool. But I also learned like that startup, like the CEO was like stealing money. And so like,
was it funded and everything?
It was like half funded. And that was the other thing. It was like, is it going to get fully funded? And like all the numbers they were sending over, like none of them really made sense. So when I started diving into them, I was like, there's something off with this. So
were you always a numbers guy? Is that what you did?
I'm very much a numbers guy. Okay. I'm a big nerd at heart. Like
what was your degree in college?
Business management.
Okay. So you've always been kind of business focused.
That's right. Yeah. But like nobody besides a crazy person, and me being one of them, would take like finance classes as like electives.
Yeah,
and I would take finance. I would take finance classes as electives because I loved numbers. Numbers just make sense to me because it's like it's factual, right? Like I remember like the SAT. coming out of high school, you could get an 800 in both the math and the English side. And I got a 790 in math, and I got like a 300 or something in the English,
very telling.
Yeah, I was like, well, like I'm not creative. Like I can't, like, if you tell me to, hey, go build a financial model or go, build a spreadsheet, I was like, oh, I can do that in 5 minutes. You say, hey, go write a paper in college. I dreaded those. I could not do that. And so math was just naturally easy to me. So I actually forgot what we were even talking about. What was the
startup?
Oh, the startup. Yeah. So
I was just curious.
So when he sent over all the numbers, I was like, yeah, math normally makes sense to me. This doesn't make sense to me. So where did all this money go, or where is all this? How is this adding up? And then I never fully figured it out, but I just told the guy who invited me, I was like, you need to ask more questions because this doesn't make sense. And I was like, I kind of caught a little bit of the startup bug at that time. And I was like, I have a startup idea. And, I shared it earlier. I won't retell it, but around the, sharing music live, sharing music in real time. So we launched that business.
What was it like launching it? Because I'm really curious, as an entrepreneur, former athlete myself, going into entrepreneurship, I love business. And one of the things that got me into entrepreneurship and business was I always wanted to be a coach and be around the game of football. And it was like my 6th or 7th year, I was like, okay, I'm footballed out. Like the business of football, just like, I don't want to be around football.
Same exact thing happened to me.
And I realized like I'm feeling called to have a big impact in the world. I feel like I can have a big impact in the world. And if I'm a coach, I can have a massive impact because these coaches in my life, some of the coaches like changed my life, these male mentors that I had. And I wanted to offer that to other kids and pay it forward. And I knew that I could have a huge impact in the world, but it'd only be like 50 to 100 guys on each team each year. And then realizing business and entrepreneurship, like I reached the very ceiling of my potential in football. Like there's nothing I could have really accomplished more, like maybe micro percentages more, but I got to the top and like, that's it. With entrepreneurship, like there's no ceiling. The only ceiling on it is your own limiting beliefs and opportunities, and you can break through those constantly. And so that's why I love entrepreneurship. And so I'm really curious, just maybe for people listening, like what it takes to actually start a business. Because there's a lot of people that, and I always had a lot of ideas too. It's like, oh, this business idea, this would work. And I even have a couple of friends, it's like, oh, I have this business idea. And I have money. So they come to me and invest in me. And they're looking for investment. But now I have the experience of all these questions of like, this is what you need to do to actually start a business, because everybody has a good idea. So you have this idea. What does it take to actually get it off the ground?
Yeah. It's funny because like, so Y Combinator is is the largest and most successful accelerator of small stage companies, like big. I'm not sure if you're familiar with YC, but like like Uber, Lyft, like Airbnb, or I'm not sure if Lyft in the Uber, Airbnb. I don't know why I'm blanking on so many.
They went through Y Combinator.
Y Combinator, wow. And so like a lot of these massive companies that they were incepted went to Y Combinator. And Y Combinator put out this big thing of like, we've seen some of the largest tech companies grow and scale through us. And they ranked like what it takes to grow a company. And it had like market timing, funding, team, how good the idea was. And it was like 10 different requirements. And out of those things, like from 1 to 10, the idea was like 9th. It was like like grit or perseverance was one of them. It was like
so many variables.
You could take the world's best idea and fall short a couple of those and it'll go nowhere.
Yeah.
And you can take a very mediocre idea, but you have an amazing team, you have amazing perseverance, you have amazing that.
And the timing and the opportunity.
The number one thing was market timing.
Yeah.
So you have to time the market.
That's out of your circumstance a lot of times.
It's out of your circumstances about 95% of the time. Yeah. And then, this is something we were talking about while we were working out, is like, the benefit of entrepreneurship is what you were saying around, hey, your only ceiling is the glass ceiling in your belief system. But the one thing about football or about other careers, like you can control some of that. You have a little bit more control over it. Like if you put the work in, there's a higher likelihood of success coming back to you. Like it's very binary. Like I've heard like the thing about like the gym or the kitchen, like your body is a reflection of that. Like it's not like you could eat eat right, you could train super awesome and you're still going to be morbidly obese. Like it's not that won't happen. And that's how a lot of things happen. But entrepreneurship is
do all the right things, you still get punched in the face.
You could do all the right things and the market could still punch you in the face, or still wrong things could happen or bad things could happen. So you do all the right things with the hope in the belief that it's going to go well. And so that's what makes it entrepreneurship awesome, but also, scary in a lot of regards. So, what it takes being comfortable, you asked me that, I think that was the initial question. Like, what does it take? Is like, if someone asked me that, I would say being comfortable with failure and being comfortable with learning, because it will not go right at first and probably for a long time. Like, you're going to learn some really hard lessons. Like I went to school, I got my MBA, I, read entrepreneurship books. This time around, I was like, every mentor, like talking, we went through Techstars, we tried, I soaked up so much, tried to soak up so much knowledge, and you still fail. Like you still get pushed down and your face shoved in the mud. Feels like a daily routine.
And those where you learn the lessons, right?
But that's where you learn, right?
You can't excel in entrepreneurship if you don't actually start and go fail. Like you have to fail as fast as you can. The faster you fail, the better you would do.
Yeah, that was Facebook's mantra, and it's been coined, fail fast and learn. Because that is what you have to do. Because a lot of times, founders will be like, do I make this decision? Do I do a combination of them? Should I do this? And it's like, a lot of times you'll spend a month debating it and still get the wrong one. You know what I'm saying? And so like a lot of times you just have to try it. And then, so there's a whole system of like testing and learning. Like, should we go through A, B, and C? Like use data as much as you can. Like, hey, let's run the quickest test we can. Did it make an improvement? No, forget about it. Did it make an improvement? Okay. Yes. Let's figure out how we expand upon that. Let's figure out how to do it better now. But in the course of Earbuds, me and one other person put a little bit of seed money in the deal to get it started. We built a very rough version of the app that worked and functioned. We were able to raise a round around that. But right shortly after that round, this is where failure comes in. This is our first major feeling of failure. We realized we outsourced all the tech, because that's, as much as I'm a math and numbers guy, I'm not a computer science guy. I don't know how to write code. I don't know how to do that stuff. And the people we outsourced it to built it in a way that wasn't scalable. So even if it worked beyond our wildest expectations, it could never hold more than like a couple thousand like congruent listeners, because it would just break and crash. And I was like, well,
that doesn't work.
We're building this,
I'm not building it for my friends.
Yeah, it's not going to work. And so we had to start over in a lot of ways. And that was
how much money did you invest in the initial tech build out?
I think it was like $60,000. Okay. So it's a lot of money depending on who you're starting to.
But you could easily spend $500,000 on a tech build out.
Yes. I mean, we've raised a lot of money at this point, several million at this point. And so, people think like, oh, I have an app idea. I'm like,
good luck.
You have no idea. Yeah. like I have like 20 grand and I think I'm going to build this app and market it and do all this stuff. I'm like, we need to talk.
So experiencing this failure, 60 grand down the drain. I mean, you got at least a proof of concept that worked, and now you just need to figure out how to build it at scale.
Right. And so, we basically rebuilt the product, started building a team, had a little bit of success. It took way longer and way more money. It always that's kind of the par for the course. Than we initially thought, but we were able to, build enough excitement, traction to raise another round.
How much did you raise at that point?
So our first like friends and family round was 630,000.
Dang, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And then we raised a seed round of 1.5 on top of that. And I think that was the point of the story. And so we raised a 1.5 round.
And that's from venture capital?
There was one venture capital firm in there, but mostly angels.
Okay.
So we started to build that out even more.
And having that 1.5, you were able to start building a team and infrastructure, not just the technology, starting to build a business around the idea.
Started building a team.
How was that process? Not really leading. I mean, having leadership skills from football, but never really leading a team in a business setting. Was that a steep learning curve for you?
Very steep.
Yeah.
If you would have asked me, hey, as a founder slash, because it's so funny, like if you have, 2 employees and you're the CEO, it's like, I always prefer the term founder until you're a much bigger established company.
So you have like a leadership team. That's
yeah, a leadership
people.
team or a board or, at least enough employees where it's like, because if someone asks you like, what's your title? I always just say founder, or I say founder slash CEO in an email or something like that. But if you would have asked me, hey, what's a founder's responsibilities? Like I would have listed, I was like, oh, you got to do this, this, this. And then I would say like lead the team is like one bullet point. But really what being a founder is like that one bullet point expanded into like 20 bullet points, right? Like you don't get as much individual contribution work as, I roll up my sleeves and try to I need to get my stuff done too. But I mean, you got to cast the vision to your employees. And then managing that too, right? Like, we have an amazing team at Earbuds now.
How big is your team?
We have 8 full-time W-2, and then we have 4 contractors. So we're at, hold on. We have 3 contractors. I apologize. So we're at 11. We're at 11. I knew the number was 11, so I was wondering how I did the math there. You were going to start questioning when I said I was a math guy.
I'm not the numbers guy. I'm not the numbers guy, but that doesn't seem right. Employees are real people. I mean, they're assets. They're able to bring their contributions, but things happen in a workplace. One employee might start beefing with another one, or they think their ideas aren't being taken seriously enough, or they want a raise, or they want this, or have to be a sort of a therapist and understanding the energy dynamics of the whole culture and leading and managing, and like that's the whole job in itself.
Well, that, and then plus like when something catastrophic happens, like hey, we had this big marketing campaign, but it didn't work that well, or we thought we were going to get this fundraising round, but it fell through, or anything that like bad happens in the business is yourself. You're like, okay, I know how I can process this. Because like football, you're used to, you don't win every rep in a game, right? Like you're going to have bad plays. You learn how to shake it off and learn.
Tell yourself the story, shift the story. You can't let yourself get lost and like, fuck, I suck.
Exactly. You're just like, you have to go to like, okay, it's the next play. Yeah. I don't care about that play. I can watch that in film tomorrow, but we have to go to the next play. Because if you just dread on that play, then you start compounding. You start getting a lot of bad plays. But with the team, you're worried like, like how are they going to process this news? And I don't want to hide it from them. Like there's a lot of trust of someone joining a small team, and they get a lot of upside with with the expectation that we're going to be successful. But how are they going to handle news that when COVID happened and we were going to get this big funding check? Well, most of the people saying they were going to fund us stopped because the world was ending with COVID, and she was like, well, how are they going to react to that? And that's a lot, because then you need to be able to communicate that. You need to be able to manage that. You need to be able to really know how they're feeling more than just what they might tell you. And
a little bit of intuition involved.
There's intuition, but it's also like just keeping the team rallied around the mission, the vision, the core values that you establish as a company. And that is your job as a founder, and to make sure we're continuing to make first downs. My team gives me a hard time because I use more football
analogies, like rolling their eyes.
Yeah, I always say something, and they're always like they're like, oh, football analogy.
Take us through because not a lot of founders have one of your initial ideas, and then you start moving on it. You're able to raise money and then finding success early on. Talk about that and how that felt.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty. For every big success, we probably had 3 to 5 little failures of like, oh, we thought this was going to be really well, this is going to be really well done or work, and it just didn't. But when we started to get some success, a couple of years into the business, we were excited. We were getting, when COVID happened, when 2020 happened, we started getting some real user numbers. A lot of it was led by influencers. We had, I told you, a lot of these athletes on board. We had a lot of artists on board. And then with COVID, people just found really creative ways to use us. There was a yoga studio in LA that used this. I never talked to them. I have no idea how they found us, but they would do these virtual yoga classes using earbuds as the music that everybody would go to. It's like, well, turn on earbuds, go to my channel. And then every single one of their yoga classes during the day would have like 500 people in it. And they would just
listen to the same song,
listen to the same, and they were doing yoga from home together. And so, or people found us for like birthday parties or, kind of virtual silent discos. And like we were using a lot of creative ways, synchronizing golf carts, or boats, if you're tied together on Lake Travis or something. So we were using a lot of different ways, and that was pretty cool. It was, we got excited.
What was the height of the success? Where did you guys take this thing before the real challenge?
I knew we were on to some type of product market fit when there was like 1 month just in the iOS store. We had like 50,000 downloads that we didn't pay for. They just came in
organically
came in, and you're like, we're getting 50,000 downloads a month, for free, like just sitting here. Like normally like a really good app store conversion is about $2 now. I mean, inflation, when I started, it was probably about $1.50. And so I was like, we would have to pay $100,000 to get that many downloads. And so I was like, there's something here. We're working here. And then like, that wasn't just one magical month. I mean, it was starting to compound, and it was like, all right, we're rolling, because, if we stay at this trajectory, the previous month we probably had 30,000 downloads, and, the month before that we probably had 15. And like, it was like, okay, it's starting to peak, or it's starting to not peak, but it's starting to gain momentum. And like, what if we get 100,000 or 200,000, just organic downloads a month? I was like, now we'll be in the millions of users soon. Like, this is going to be, life-changing for our company. And then you don't even know about this one, but one upcoming. But shortly after that, in 2020, the latest iOS release, they changed the way the audio player worked, and it affected how our Apple Music's API and Spotify's API all interacted with the media player. So it didn't matter for a lot of apps, but any apps touching synchronous or like real time, it created a few like lag moments in it.
Damn.
And so like, if you're listening virtually, it didn't matter as much, but all the people that were in the same, golf carts or whatever, or it just added bugs to the experience. And then we just saw users starting to go like this now.
Damn.
And so like, that was another thing, is like, I talked about earlier, is like things that, and not that I haven't made mistakes. I've made more mistakes than any founder has ever made, but like, those are the ones that are like,
how did you realize this was happening when you saw the numbers, or did someone reach out to you with like a ticket, like, hey, this isn't working? How did you figure this out?
No, it was our engineers, because we started getting a lot more. We had a lot of just automated bug requests where like, either users could submit them, or if like we could see failures on our back end, it's like we're getting a lot of bugs. And we had a chart on our dashboard. It was like playback consistency, and it was always like 99 point something, meaning if like we couldn't control if someone lost signal or drove through a tunnel and like they, whatever, but that started dipping into like the low 90s, and you're like, wait, now one out of every 10 songs is something's either lagging or skipping, or okay, like now, like this is major issues.
So how did you go into problem solving mode? What'd you guys do?
And so when we tried to figure it out, we realized it was some of the, OS changes that Apple made. And we were able to go in and fix a lot of those.
On your end, or was it Apple's thing?
It was Apple's end, but we were able to, go in and make changes to affect or to counteract the changes that they made.
Oh, on your tech, so that it wasn't.
But it derailed us as a company a lot because we had these big plans of things we were going to build, and we had to like put all that on hold
Put out the fire.
to go put out the fire, right? And so,
opportunity costs, huh? Instead of putting all those resources and energy into scaling on this big momentum and taking it out, it's like road stop. We got to figure this out. Wow.
And so that is, I had a slide on one of our earliest decks. I was like, and the slide said, we're bringing the players together, and it had earbuds in the middle of it. And it was like, here's the streaming services, here's the labels. Cause we had like great relationships with the labels. We were the only app that is partnered with the 4 largest streaming services. We partnered with Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and Amazon still. We had athletes, we had consumers, we had brands, we were doing brand sponsorships. We were like, and it was like, we are doing all these things and we're sitting at the center of this, and that works. And we saw it when it's working. But what problems is it's like a cog in the machine. Like if one part of the machine breaks down, the machine doesn't just keep running. Like it needs that one part working. And so like, if the influencers all of a sudden just stop posting, or if the streaming services stop working, or if Apple changes something, like it affected us in a very material way. And so, since then, those are just the lessons learned. I think if I had to summarize what I'm saying here, it's just, those are the lessons learned that you kind of have to learn the hard way, is like, we have to do everything we can and in our power to not be just so dependent on all these third parties, because if they change their mind, or if they change something, or if they break something, it can't break us. And that was lessons we learned the hard way.
Talk about that big lesson with, you guys are figuring out that problem, you guys solve it, and then you guys are still kind of aiming for the moon, and things are looking up. You're having all this success. 50,000 downloads for an app as a new founder, like that's
in a month.
Epic. In a month. Yeah, in a month.
And we had more than that. That was just the ones we couldn't account for, like, because we were adversing too.
Oh, those are just the organic downloads. Yeah, so you're just crushing it.
Yeah, that felt like a really great month. And we're going down this path. Fix a lot. Now we're more in like reactive mode instead of proactive mode. We're thinking about pivoting the business to allow to not be so dependent on these partners. And the big change you're referring to is, ultimately we were leveraging a Spotify endpoint. It was Spotify's mobile API, and they just completely deprecated it. They just turned it off. And they said, and it wasn't like, hey, Spotify just turned this off for earbuds. Spotify turned that off for everybody. And
why?
I have a lot of theories. I think it was in a direct response for companies like Earbuds, because Spotify released a live product that was a direct competitor of ours. And I think this was their way of preventing free competition. Mm-hmm. Spotify, Spotify has 400 plus million users around the world, monthly active users now. When I started Earbuds 5 years ago, that number was like 70 million. And so they've done an amazing job scaling, because 70 million, like I would be thrilled with 70 million users right now. And one of the biggest ways they did that is they opened up a lot of their APIs. They have 4 different APIs, and they said, and we had a direct deal with them too that allowed us additional functionality. And
what's an API, just for non-tech people?
It is basically, in the most layman terms, it's a way for your system. It's like 2 ports. Like, hey, Spotify has this whole machine and you have your whole machine. It's like the plugin that connects them.
So you're able to plug in as a third-party business into what they're doing.
That's right. And so
directly,
an API is mostly built for. We weren't even really. We were using their SDK, which is software development kit. An API is like an SDK is part of an API. So like it's
So they turn that off. So they don't want anybody else using their stuff. It's
right.
Like, we're going to be running our own stuff.
They still have other APIs and SDKs you could plug into, but they deprecated the mobile one, the one that was like mostly the one that we were already using. And And so,
did they warn you at all for that, or they just turned it off one day?
They just turned it off.
So how'd you guys respond to that?
Well, they didn't send us like a direct, hey, by the way, guess what? We're thinking about turning this off. One of our engineers did catch it, about 3 weeks before. They put in like a tiniest thing on their API website. It was like, by the way, there's some changes coming to the mobile one. It didn't say, hey, we're deprecating this, we're turning this off. It just said, there will be changes made to this on this date. So heads up. And it was like not the headline, it was like a footnote. And he was like
an asterisk in the small print.
Yeah, it was. And he was like, and so we were like, I don't think this is going to affect us, but they said some changes will be made. So we've learned already that, the changes might affect us. And turns out they just turned it off, and it was turned off for everyone. And so,
how'd you guys put out that fire? I mean, that you can't, most of your business is probably,
most of our users are Spotify users.
Yeah. So it doesn't work, right? Especially because you were able to connect like Pandora and Spotify, like all these people through one app, right?
Yeah, that was kind of like, and it still is the magic. And I definitely want to save some time because that's what we're building now, and because I think this has the potential to add much more value in users' lives, and B, I think it has the potential to be much bigger because it's going to add more value into users' experiences. But when they turned off the mobile one, they still had other ones that we could choose from. It's just, so we ended up using a different one of their APIs now to rebuild our experience. But at that point, we had already made the decision to pivot and say, hey, we're no longer going to be just about live listening. We're just going to give sharing music a home. And because one of our probably number one requests when we were alive is like, how do I connect with the people in the app when they're not live? And we allowed you in the old app, what we now refer to as Earbuds Live, we allowed you to go back and listen to someone's live session. Like you could go back and watch a Twitch stream or something else, even now, or a YouTube live video, even though it's not live anymore. We could go interact with it, but there was no real-time interaction if no one was live first. We didn't have DMs or anything like that. And so people were like, how do I share music with someone? Why do I have to go live to share music with someone? And one of our thesis around the initial concept, I was like, sharing music is broken. I had multiple slides in my deck around this because it was like, because the music industry is so fragmented that, a large portion use Spotify around the world. Apple Music's even bigger in the US, especially with certain demographics, certain age groups. Now Amazon is a real player. Pandora is still widely used. And then you look at like Tidal and Deezer and YouTube Music, and you go down the list, it's not like everybody has a Netflix account. Everybody has a different
one of these things.
But in the difference between Hulu and Netflix is like Netflix has unique content, Hulu has unique content. It would be like if Netflix and Hulu were the exact same shows and movies inside, just like music industry is. It's just which one you subscribe for. And so the reason why social never existed in music is because, Spotify is never going to call up the phone and say like, hey, Apple, you want to build something together? It's always going to be a third party. And even Spotify and Apple told me that. Because when I sat down with Spotify and Apple to get deals done with them, they were the first two streaming services I met with. They go, this won't work without the other one, because this is the reason why we haven't done social. And so where we're left in the state of affairs of sharing music is today in 2023, the number one way people share music is texting a screenshot. Because it's, hey, Joe, check this song out. You need to add this to the yoga mix or the workout playlist. They're like, either I don't know what streaming service Joe has, or I know he's on a different one than me. I actually don't know. Which streaming service do you use? I
used Pandora for a long time just because I like the radio component, but now I use Spotify.
Right. And so if I was an Apple music user and I sent you that link, it's going to show you a preview of that song, but I
need to have an account to actually listen to it, download it,
or add it to a playlist or make it actionable or whatever. Like
fascinating.
And so we're like, outside of the number one way is texting screenshots, and the second way is sending a YouTube link, but that's not very actionable either. if I send you a YouTube link and you want to add it to one of your Spotify playlists, you still have to go through and do all that. And
like
so
4 steps to like find
yeah,
myself, which this day and age is like, that's way too many steps.
exactly. And so we said, okay, what if we leveraged all of our song matching technology, which we used to do in real time? If the host was playing Spotify, you could listen to, or if the host was playing Apple and you were Spotify, you could still listen along real time because we'd find it and match you in real time on Spotify. And it was like, what if we did that, but we just built the best home for sharing music and discussing music? Like, okay, what does that look like? And so not only all the depth of knowledge we've learned in our old product with Earbuds Live, we started interviewing a lot of our existing users, a lot of Gen Z, a lot of, just music heads. And like, how do you currently share music? What makes music sharing important? And it's like, well, we want to talk about the music. It's not just here, send a song. It's why is it important? What's the context to it? What did this song remind you of? What kind of state does this put you in? When do you listen to it? Do you listen to it while you're working out or while you're cooking or while you're, studying? And like, so you want to talk about the songs. Oh, you like that song? Well, if you like that song, you should probably look at this artist too. And so like chat in communication is a really important element to that. So what we pivoted to, what we call Earbuds Chat, is basically a home for sharing music. No matter where it's coming from, it'll show up to you in the platform that you choose. You have the exact full library that you would have with Spotify anyways. You have all your existing content. If you want to search a song that's not, you have full access to Spotify. But you can share and interact with anyone in the entire world, and no matter what streaming service they're using.
Wow. And nobody's doing this.
And there's not a single app in the world where you can play music and chat about it all in one app. There's not one besides us.
And when's this relaunch?
We're in the process of relaunching it right now.
Amazing.
Right now. So we actually started advertising this week for the first
congrats,
time.
Man.
And so, just we're not, dumping our entire marketing budget this week because we want to test it. We want to refine it. We want to make sure that it's performing well, both from a downloads perspective, but also from from an engagement perspective as well.
So it's a social platform, social media for music lovers to be able to share music.
So essentially, that's exactly right. So what the app is in its purest form today, you have access to share music with anybody. You can make it one-to-one, many-to-many. You can talk about the music. You can collaborate on playlists. You can, you can build a playlist on the fly by yourself or with friends. You have a very rich profile where you can see the people you're interacting with, and where we're taking. You have your full library, like I said, and you can see not only your existing Spotify playlist, your existing or anything new from Spotify, and then you can see all the content you're building within the app. What will be in the app very, very soon, within the next month to 6 weeks, is we're adding ChatGPT, so we can have OpenAI help you build your playlist or give you feedback on your playlist. I'm not sure how much you played around with ChatGPT.
I have a little bit, not extensively.
It's actually a really, really, really cool product from a music standpoint and music recommendation standpoint.
What do you do? Like type in like I'm feeling this certain way or I'm looking for this type of music, and it'll just spit out recommendations? We basically have like 8 or 9 ways that it can help in like helping you find song recommendations or even build you a whole playlist, or even feedback on your existing playlist and why. Or like when you share a song, it can give you a fun tidbit about that song. Like, oh, did you know the artist was in the Whataburger parking lot at 2 a.m. when he wrote this song because his girlfriend just broke up with him? Like you can make, fun little moments about it. Even in OpenAI's DALL-E product, like an image deal, we can automate. It'll take all the songs from a certain playlist and create an image around it, just from certain aspects of the song and the vibes and the beats and the topics of the song. And so that's a really fun, engaging way. We're also, we also built a Tinder-like game, which internally we call Discover, but we think we're going to call it Swipey, where like you plug in the type of music you're looking for and we load it up and you can swipe left or right on it like Tinder, and it can build you a fun playlist that way where you can share. You can build that, you can play it in a game in a That's
kind of a
pretty genius there. Who came up with that one? Do you have like a head of product or something?
We do. We have a great head of product. His name's Dave. Dave Dave is kind of the, one of the geniuses behind a lot of the stuff we're building and why it looks and feels and performs so well.
Where did you find him?
Dave came from Apple. We were able to recruit both him and our head of engineering from Apple.
Wow. That's nice.
Yeah, they're two of the most talented people I've ever worked with. And outside of that, both from the AI, the AI thing makes it a little bit more fun, a little bit more engaging. The swipey thing is a really fun.
So you got to gamify these apps too, like to keep people on them.
Yeah, it's just something you can do. Like, there's a really famous head of product guy on Twitter named Nikita, and he was like, if your app has to have something that they can do while they're on the toilet, and like that swipey game is like, hey, if you have 30 seconds and you're just looking to, you don't want to connect, you want to do all these stuff, you don't want to go build a playlist every single time you download the app. What's a fun thing you can do and so AI and that swipey thing are some fun things. And then
that's really cool.
And then, even though there's a sense of community already within the app, that is going to be, as soon as these next two things get in the app, like, we are really expounding upon that as like building the best community possible in the app. And we have a lot of different ways we can do that. Allowing, users to come together over a common thought, artist, genre, or affinity, where, if they, if there's really big jazz fans, all the jazz fans can come in the same group and the same and interact and talk about, get really high quality conversations around.
So there's these groups that can be created in genre groups. And is that like, if I want to create a group, I create it, or is those groups that you create as a business that people can join to, or both and?
Eventually it's probably going to be both and we've done a lot of work for starts, and there's a lot of complexities, way more than I want to get into on this podcast, but like, and in different users, if you talk to different users, they want different things. And so basically a way to bring that fulfills our mission, right? Bringing people together through music, through sharing music. And so, the community element is when we feel like, you got to make it fun, you have to make it engaging. And then kind of the community is the final thing. Cause there's already community in the app right now. And we already have some users that are using it pretty regularly. But, if we nail community, that we'll know that's a really strong sign of we'll be successful.
Beautiful, man. I'm super excited for you. All right. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the show, unfortunately, this podcast got cut short. My nightmare of getting up from my seat and seeing that the recorder was no longer recording manifest itself. And luckily, there was only about 10 to 12 minutes that you missed. And my deepest apologies for the abrupt stop. Didn't miss that much. Jason just kind of talked about a little bit more about his entrepreneurial journey and where to connect with him. So I'll put that in the show notes, his contact and his website to his company. I hope you enjoyed this show. If you enjoyed it and there's stories that inspired you, or you felt connected in some way and someone popped into your awareness that you thought might like to hear it, go ahead and share the episode with them. If you don't already, make sure you subscribe and follow wherever you watch or listen to this podcast. I have a lot of really good episodes coming up. The conversations just keep getting better. It's just blowing me away the synchronicities and the people that are finding their way into my life and into this show. I hope you're enjoying them. If you have been enjoying this podcast as much as I have, a great way to support it is by simply leaving a 5-star review. I know a lot of people say that, and a lot of people don't actually do it. But if you feel called and you just have a couple minutes, you can do it right now. And whether it's Apple or Spotify or YouTube, leave a comment, say some nice words, how this podcast has impacted you, because that really does help grow the show. And not only with algorithms, but people that are looking for podcasts are an investment. Like when you go to listen to a podcast, you're investing some time, and especially these long form shows that have been 2.5 hours. So let's spread the word, because I don't know about you, but this show I'm loving it so much. I'm so grateful I'm podcasting again. And yeah, I'm excited to go on this journey with all of you. The community is continuing to build, and the audience is continuing to grow, and the guests are continuing to show up. And, as this community grows, we'll be able to get bigger and bigger guests and drop into some more impactful and expansive conversations with some incredible athletes in the future. I already have a handful recorded that are coming up very soon. And next week's episode is with my beautiful wife, Sarah. Either next week or the week after. You're not going to want to miss it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow wherever you listen to podcasts, leave a review, and see you guys next week.